like my baby mama, know how to take care of me. Give my baby problems, you gon' regret everything. So I let her know, gotta let her know. Like my baby mama, know how to take care of me. Give my baby problems, you gon' regret everything. So I let her know, gotta let her know. Came through the front door, I'll be ready for her. And if it's what you want, I'ma give it to you. Yeah, promise, I'ma give it to you. Baby, stress is all around us, these high ceilings, and I need it, baby. Pressure and make diamonds, I won't steal it, baby. Solid,
I'd like to reconvene the regular meeting of the City Council Public Finance Authority. Clerk, please call the roll.
I'd just like to mention, too, that pursuant to Resolution 2001-54, Councilmember Burns requested and has received permission to be absent tonight.
Thank you.
So, Councilmember Kalmick.
Here.
Councilmember Mosier.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Vandermark.
Here.
Mayor Strickland.
Here.
Councilmember McKeon.
Here.
Councilmember Bolton.
Here.
All present.
Today will be led the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilwoman Rhonda Bolton.
Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now we'll have the invocation done by the Huntington Beach Police and Fire Chaplain Roger Wing.
Good evening. Would you now please pray with me as we ask God's blessing on this evening's City Council meeting? Lord, you encourage us in your word to incline your ear to wisdom and apply your heart to understanding. And we pray for your wisdom and understanding this evening and throughout tonight's meeting. As our City Council considers all of the many difficult issues before them, may you provide your wisdom and discernment on each topic and guide them as they deliberate and make decisions. As our council members discuss the issues, may you bring your peace, unity, and harmony through all the discussions. We ask that you would provide each one with discernment, clarity, and direction as they consider and deliberate the issues on the agenda this evening. We pray that you would give each council member patience as they hear the comments from those who will be coming to the podium to speak this evening. Keep them open to the feedback they receive, both positive and negative, so they can graciously lead and govern with the most complete information and to provide the best direction for our city. And Lord, please guide each speaker this evening to offer their comments clearly and concisely, with dignity and respect. Lord, you've called each council member to the role they now occupy for such a time as this. So we ask you to guide them by your Spirit. We ask you to bless each of our council members and their families, that you would keep them healthy and safe. And we pray for each and every one of our first responders and public servants as they so selflessly and faithfully serve our community. We ask your guidance and wisdom for each of our city leaders and for all of our city employees who so faithfully and diligently serve us all. Lord, we ask you to bless our meeting this evening, and may your peace and wisdom guide all that occurs tonight. And we ask this all in your wonderful name, Lord. Amen.
Amen. Members, going down the agenda. City Attorney, do we have anything to report?
Nothing tonight from closed session. Thank you, Mayor.
City Clerk, do we have any supplemental communications?
Yes, we do, Mayor. My little sheet here. For consent calendar item number 9, an email regarding the reappointment of Jerry Person and a correction made by me. I uploaded a notice of vacancy that was missing from the record. For item number 10, 2 emails received regarding the annual Community Development Block Grant and Home Investment Partnerships end-of-year progress report to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and an interdepartmental communication received from Jennifer Villasenor, our Acting Director of Community Development, regarding revisions to the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report. For consent item 12, a memo received from Shannon Levin, our Council Policy Analyst, regarding correction to the response letter to the Orange County Grand Jury reports related to animal welfare, and an email communication regarding that item. For ordinances for introduction, we received a memo from Captain Bo Swensvo with red line version of the changes to the Huntington Beach Municipal Code, Chapter 10.84, relating to bicycle regulations, and an email communication on that item. That's it.
Thank you. City Clerk, do we have anyone signed up to speak?
Yes, I think we have 13 signed up to speak.
Great.
Is that
I'll
a
make this
crazy
announcement.
number?
Yeah, I'll make this announcement. Actually, do the 10, and then I'll make the announcement.
Okay, as they're coming down, sure.
Yes, thank you.
All right, I'll call everybody down. Shami D, Pat Goodman, Buzz McCord, Nora Peterson, Andrew Einhorn, Suzanne White, Tim Geddes, Amory Hansen, Zignesh Pader, Dina Chavez. Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you. At this time, the City Council will receive comments from members of the public regarding any topic, including items on the open session agenda. Individuals wishing to provide a comment may do so in person by filling out a request to speak form delivered to the City Clerk. All speakers are encouraged but not required to identify themselves by name. Each speaker may have up to 3 minutes unless the volume of speakers warrants reducing the time allowance. Please note that the Brown Act does not allow discussion or actions on topics that are not on the agenda. Members of the public who would like to speak directly with a council member on an item not on the agenda may consider scheduling an appointment by contacting the City Council's Administrative Assistant at 714-536-5553 or emailing the entire City Council at city.council@surfcity-hb.org. Thank you so much, and thank you for being here. I don't know who's starting, but thank you so much for being here this evening.
Hi, my name's Shami D, and I'm here tonight to say some things that just need to be said. When the new council members were seated last December, people expected change, but I don't think any of us realized it would be a hostile takeover. This new council has not done what they promised to do: work on finances, keep the charter from being changed, make the city safer, listen to the public. Instead, they focused on things they never, ever mentioned. Raising campaign spending by 900%, proposing to overrule librarians and ban books, prohibit the pride flag, dissolve city commissions and substitute secret ad hoc committees, award huge increases to the city attorney's salary and staff, and propose cuts in services that residents really care about. Even proposing radical changes to the city charter, which they absolutely promised not to do. By completely ignoring the other 3 council members, the Fab Four are also ignoring the residents that they represent. We've had split, even very unbalanced councils before, but never one that was this autocratic. Really, council votes no longer matter. Tony decides what to put on the agenda, and those items are approved 4-3 or 4 to something, and he can't recall a time when the new members did not vote as a block. They ignore other council members, just like they ignore public comments or requests for information. In fact, we no longer really have 7 council members, we have 1 who decides everything. And he doesn't play by the rules, refusing to follow the published agenda, cutting off speakers' minutes to 90 seconds, which are stated at 3 in the city charter, and structuring the government so there is less oversight and accountability. Just last June, the new council blindsided the residents with a last-minute series of proposed budget cuts in city services that they had never mentioned before. And then the next week, they solved it all by magically introducing 2 sheets of paper after the meeting had begun that balanced the budget and didn't cause any problems, although the approved budget has never been published on the city website. So now we know we're in real trouble. No one knows what the council will do next. Public transparency has virtually disappeared, and public input is a thing of the past. The city is planning to spend more money it most likely doesn't have. We were led to believe that the Fab Four, which some people call Fash Four, were fiscal conservatives who were going to focus on saving Surf City,
10
not
seconds.
bankrupting it. Promises made, promises not kept. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you so much. Next speaker.
Hi, Mayor Strickland, council members. My name's Pat Goodman, and I appreciate the report by Lieutenant Smith and the City Homeless Task Force that's presented tonight regarding the status of these services and the behavioral health services in our city. I also appreciate the advocacy identified in the report of the full council to capture funding and other resources for this important work. This report provides good data for decision-making to address the housing needs of the city's residents. Thank you. Agenda item 10 appears to be a pro forma annual report of restricted federal funds used to address housing and social service needs of our residents. This too is important data for decision-making related to housing needs. I've read through this annual report for 2022-23, and I noticed references that the city is working on its housing element in pages 28 through 32. I believe it's been corrected and updated to reflect the reality that the City Council has not adopted a housing element. This inaction has created an environment of economic uncertainty in our city and also puts code enforcement, vital programs for seniors, veterans, families, survivors of domestic violence, youth, and the disabled in jeopardy, and result in real negative impacts to our Huntington Beach residents. In addition to public safety, roads, parks, libraries, and reliable water sources, addressing the housing needs of the people of Huntington Beach ranks as the primary responsibility of the council. These policy decisions by the City Council represent the essence of local control. I'm sorry to see that there has been no effort by the council majority to put a housing plan on the agenda since March, when it failed to pass the housing element. Please pass the housing element to maintain control of zoning, security for residents, and economic development in our city. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you. Next speaker, thanks so much for being here.
My name is Suzanne White. I've lived in Huntington Beach for about 15 years, and I worked for the Red Cross, and I never paid attention to local politics until people I trust pointed out to me that we have a Nazi sitting on this group. But I wouldn't want you to just take my word for it. I found a letter from the Anti-Defamation League, who are experts on Nazis, and to quote from that letter, "There is ample evidence that Gracie Vandermark has made bigoted and hateful comments, and that she has participated in activities organized and led by white supremacists," unquote. And the rest of the letter details some of that evidence. Whatever your party, I do not believe that good people support white supremacists. And I have one question for everyone in this room and everyone watching. I'm sure that 90% of you had fathers, mothers, grandparents, great-grandparents who fought in World War II to make this country safe for democracy. And we did that by getting rid of the Nazis. I want you to think about having a conversation with that relative, looking them in the eye and saying, "Hey, we have a Nazi on our city council." What do you think they would say? What do you think they would ask you to do? And I ask you to think about that and go out and behave accordingly. Thank you.
Next speaker, thanks for being here.
I'm Andy Einhorn, Huntington Beach, California. Most people use the OK sign as just okay, but in other cases, there's an additional underlying meaning. I think it's important for all to understand it's being used for promoting white power agenda. When used in context with other clear indicators of white supremacy, one can draw that conclusion. Let's see a pattern that occurs here. Vandermark is on the right, and one of her associates is showing the white power gesture on the left. Here's another picture. This is from the Cerritos newspaper. Someone flashing a white supremacist sign. This picture, Vandermark, is seen as number one on the far right. Notice the hand gestures in this picture. Last week in the Orange County Register, and I quote, Mosier questioned if Vandermark had denied the Holocaust had occurred and had associations with the Proud Boys, something Vandermark denies, unquote. Person number 4, AKA Johnny Benitez, to the left, wearing sunglasses, is a white supremacist and a former member of the Proud Boys. Person number 5, Augustus Invictus, he is circled just below to the left of Vandermark, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, and I quote from Invictus, "Do I believe that 6 million Jews were killed by Hitler? I'm still waiting to see those facts." This person was also present when white nationalists shouted racist slogans such as blood and soil and Jews will not replace us as they marched on the University of Virginia grounds. Vandermark is circled on the right. Pictures with her associates showing hate gestures. Is this normal? I contacted the city and no investigation was conducted about Vandermark, but instead, Councilwoman Mosier was censured. That was farcical. Each of us has a purpose, and there are times and causes that demand our initiative and responsibility. It's now the majority's duty on this council to cease protecting one of their peers and do what is morally correct by establishing an external, independent review of her conduct. We want the truth. We will accept the truth. Why doesn't the majority fear establishing a committee? Thank you.
Thanks. Next speaker, thanks for being here.
I second that. My name is Nora Peterson. I live in Huntington Beach the last 35 years. In 1865, a young girl named Alice fell through a rabbit hole into a fantasy world. I fully relate to Alice and imagine her saying that our city council meetings have become curiouser and curiouser. The fumbling four Tweety-Ds and Twiddly-Dums have campaigned on protecting our city charters, and now they're bent on destroying them. The same four warn that our city will face a budget shortage, yet strangely, these four want to take over the elections of the city from the county, which is a process that will cost taxpayers millions of dollars in each election cycle. Even more frightening is that one of the proponents of taking over the election is our mayor, who had to pay a $40,000 fine for election campaign money laundering and fraud in a city much like ours. The four repeatedly say that citizen safety is of prime importance, yet they've taken a dangerous stance against masks and vaccine that will imperil us all. The four has hugely increased the city attorney's salary and funded assistance for him because of the size of his workload. But now the fumbling four expect this poor, overworked lawyer to vet all the new books purchased by our public library. And the public library, the traditional source of knowledge, research, and new ideas for all Americans since Benjamin Franklin, is now believed to be promoting pornography designed to groom our populations toward deviancy. And the human rights statement serving our community for decades is now being reduced to white Christian nationalist rag. Shame, protect our charter, Alice calls Jabberwocky, meaning incoherent or nonsensical, and surely it is.
Next speaker, thanks for being here.
Hello, my name is Dina Chavez. I'm here tonight to talk about our public library and the high cost of banning books. The North Dakota State Library estimates that just for their library alone, it will cost nearly $3.3 million to reassess their collection to meet the vague specification of book ban ordinances. In Harris County, Texas, 40 book challenges in one single library have cost over $30,000. The book banners of Llano County, Texas, lost a First Amendment lawsuit brought by the people of Llano, wasted $185,000 of taxpayer money, shut down the entire digital catalog, and threatened to close the library altogether because a judge made them return 15 books. In Francis Hill, Missouri, a single book challenge now costs nearly $575. There are millions of books under review across that state. And Granite, Utah was forced to remove 94 books from the library shelves due to the complaints of 6 people at a cost of more than $100,000. At a hearing at the Utah State Legislature last October, it was revealed that $20,000 was spent to review 10 books in just one single library. Some Florida book banners have decided to outsource the work of the Book Ban Committee to artificial intelligence at a cost of between $34,000 to $135,000 annually. The AI keyword searches have now banned the dictionary. The local Rotary Club in Sarasota, Florida, was told that their annual donation of 300 dictionaries to local libraries and classrooms could not be accepted until the Book Ban Committee has read them. Meanwhile, the shelves are nearly empty and not a single new children's book has been purchased in almost 2 years. If you have a child or grandchild that reads above their grade level, Florida has a ban for that too. Children in some Florida schools are only allowed to read at or below their grade level. And imagine the surprise of parents in Dripping Springs, Florida, when they learned that they had to acquire a special library card for their teen to have access to classics such as Jane Austen's Emma and materials from the nonfiction selection, including books on history, science, art, and literature required for their schoolwork. This is just a small sample of the cost and chaos that this council seeks to inflict upon the people of the city, all based on a lie that was told here on the night of June 20th when the mayor pro tem had blown up a photo of a book that she claimed was available in the children's library, knowing full well that it was not, nor was it ever. None of the 4 of you said anything about this at all. I'd like to know how much you plan to spend on these book bans. What about the eventual lawsuits? Have you budgeted for any of this? What about the security? Libraries across the country have received bomb threats due to the exact rhetoric that we heard coming off this dais. Mr. City Attorney, why have you not stepped forward to defend our city libraries? If an outside group was attacking our library, defaming our librarians, and potentially costing the city millions of dollars, would you not step up to defend our city? The taxpayers of Huntington Beach, I believe, expect you to defend our city institutions and personnel. Is that not what we pay you for? I expect you to defend this city. Thank you.
Next speaker, thanks for being here.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Tim Geddes, and I'm a 40-year resident. In an informal definition of a dog is something that performs poorly or is not going to fulfill its intended purpose. At the so-called special meeting of the City Council last week, ostensibly to discuss the proposed charter amendments for the March primary, a meeting that wasn't so special, we never got the chance to discuss them. What we've seen of the proposed amendments are a jumbled and juvenile mass of mediocrity, in other words, dogs. And who let the dogs out? A council majority who is clearly so unfocused and unprepared to conduct serious intercourse on the topics that it wasted the entire evening for all concerned. Some have sagely contended that this is just political theater, but if so, it was theater of the absurd. This is the council majority who couldn't shoot straight. And regardless of what side of the aisle you sit on, it was amateur hour for governing a city of 200,000 that makes us look foolish. We should not be run by a TikTok council majority with tan shoes and pink shoelaces, no matter the spectacle. Now, I don't want to be overly critical of our local government because at this time, it's the only one we have. But things must improve. I would advise the City Council majority to abandon its quixotic quest to mess with our city charter and spend over $1 million of taxpayer funds with money that isn't theirs. Even if the revisions are so poorly drafted that all of them fail, the money still would have been spent, and the citizenry would be poorer for it. We need to focus on real brick and mortar city needs and not ideological pie-in-the-sky issues. Despite all your razzle-dazzle right-wingery, you have not provided leadership and representation to the community on things which are important to us. You must earn credibility in order to spend it. You have many questions raised at the special meeting to respond to on Thursday. We need answers to some, or many people will continue to dog you further. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm going to call this, lest we forget. I was on a business trip to Southeast Asia a few years ago, and suddenly on 28 January 2020, everyone in Hong Kong started wearing a mask. COVID aerosol transmission had just been confirmed. I had to make some adjustments. I dropped travel to Guangzhou, China. I continued into Vietnam just ahead of the border lockdown. In Vietnam, there were signs everywhere telling people how to wear masks, to distance and sanitize hands. And everyone, every hotel, every public space complied. I flew home in late March at LAX, no masks, no COVID signs, no sanitizers, bedlam. The White House was making total stupid COVID bullshit statements. Within 4 months, the US COVID death toll passed 100,000. Transmission and sickness were poorly understood. June 26, Texas and Florida stopped reopening as their numbers exploded. I watched on TV as El Paso hospitals used refrigerator trucks as morgues. By early December 2020, COVID had killed more Americans than 4 years of World War II. Lest we forget, seems appropriate for your thinking about COVID and the no mask mandate you're considering. By the end of 2020, 346,000 Americans had died of COVID. For the same time period in Vietnam, there were 35 COVID deaths. The U.S. went on to lead the world in the rate of COVID deaths. Our COVID toll is currently past 1,175,000. Masks and vaccines play a critical role in reducing COVID, like X-rays, cell phones, and chemotherapy. That's a scientific fact you can rely on. Life and epidemic policy is complicated, but if a person wears a correct mask the correct way, her chance of passing COVID to a loved one is reduced as much as 8 times. Her chance of receiving COVID is reduced 5 times. COVID mutates readily, hence common sense, the thousands of variant numbers and names. If a more infectious and more deadly mutant happens, and it can, we will need to mask, sanitize, and vaccinate intelligently. Your proposed resolution, no mask, no vaccine mandate, makes the Huntington Beach City Council and us look selfish and ignorant. You all stop at stop signs. You all obey speed limits, I suspect. Good for you, good for me. If you must wander into epidemiology, then resolve to make Huntington Beach an intelligent mask and vaccine city. The no mandates policy is narrow-minded, short-sighted, and unnecessary. It's also stupid. Thank you.
Next speaker, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Mr. Amory Hansen. I'm speaking tonight in support of item 17, the ordinance to clearly define electronic bicycles and apply regulations to them that also apply to bicycles. Mr. William Shakespeare once said, quote, "A rose by any other name may smell just as sweet," end quote. So it was with the horse, the carriage, the car, the bicycle, and now the electronic bicycle. All of these tools of mobility have expanded our ability to travel in Huntington Beach. Roses have thorns, but with careful handling, one can prevent injury. Clearly defining different methods of mobility and applying regulations to them will ensure that all of us will be able to ride our bicycles safely by providing the necessary tools to handle the small, unfortunate individuals who choose not to follow the tools of the road. Let's continue to support successful mobility in Huntington Beach. Once again, I urge a yes vote on item 17. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Thank you. Next speaker, thanks for being here.
Lovely to speak here. Thank you for having me. Good evening, everyone. It seems like everyone's kind of getting down on the current council and kind of using the tools that they have at their disposal right now. And many people kind of forget, this 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, that it was the previous council that opened Pandora's box, so to speak. I don't even have to think off the top of my head. I just know that when $1 million was too much money to have a flash election or to even give the runner-up fourth place in a 7-month prior election, we had to go ahead and follow suit with the Holy Charter because it was so special to us. And rather than honoring the 40,000 votes that we had for that seat, we go ahead and put Bolton in there instead, who hasn't even voted with the majority. She's obviously voting against the majority. A seat that had 40,000 residents vote for it would actually be voting with the majority. It seems like you're only representing yourself in that regard, Bolton. But more on that later. It's also noticeable that this huge expenditure of $1 million was so much that we then were perfectly capable of spending $365 million 3 months later on this project that no one was asking for. Isn't that kind of weird how that keeps happening, that hypocrisy that keeps coming forward from your guys' previous administration or council work? And by all matters, we support Gracie in this. That's why she got to the position she's in. And it's even more blatantly obvious that how a person of color can be considered a Nazi. I've watched millions of hours of footage, and I'm never going to see a brown person in any of the Hitler's Nazi videos. Sure, it's in black and white. You might get me on that one. You can't see color on that. But leave it to you guys, all of the representatives here who are defending Nazism, yet they are so afraid of this white supremacist. Last I checked, white supremacists are the ones covering their mouths and face because they are so ashamed of their ideology. Gracie's been up there perfectly straight, no problem whatsoever. It's just so blatantly obvious that the attacks that are all going one way. It was a previous council that had no problem promising one thing and going the opposite. And now this current administration council is doing exactly what we wanted them to do, which is putting max mandates and vaccine mandates out the door. We shouldn't have to be forced to be following things that we don't need to. The last person here spoke about Vietnam and how great it is over there that they had so few deaths. The reality is that they were using colds and flu cases to go ahead and hyperinflate the COVID deaths. Where did the flu go in the past years of COVID? No one knows. Gosh, it's just this constant reiteration of the same talking points. We can't even go forward because we're still arguing about the same past situation. We know right now fully that the people support the council majority, and they're going to continue to do exactly what we want them to do. So thank you again for your leadership. Thank you again for taking a stand for what's right, our individual rights and freedoms.
10 seconds.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Thank you.
All right. The final list of speakers: Neil Custer, Russell Neal, Gina Clayton-Tarvin, sorry, Cindy Marion, Ken Inouye, Patricia Pappas.
Thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you. My name is Cindy. I'm a resident homeowner here. I wanted to talk a little bit about the bicycle ordinance that you're going to be discussing and probably passing this evening. I read it through several times as well as all of the amendments. I don't have it in front of me, so I apologize if I misquote in advance. There were a couple things I hope that you discuss when you look at it. It makes reference to two-wheeled or three-wheeled vehicles. Down at the beach, they rent four-wheeled vehicles, so I don't know if those are considered bicycles, but maybe you should add that if that was inadvertently left off. I got a little confused on the civil thing versus the criminal. I'm just going to call them tickets for convenience sake here. It seemed to me that it said only criminal tickets could fight it, and that civil people, basically, if the officer gave you a civil violation, you were going to end up paying a fine, and there was no means to dispute that. And I just don't think that's correct. I think the officers are unfamiliar with the riding skill of the driver, and since you've got speed and speed limits and things like that involved, that really depends a lot on the driver, and anybody that gets pulled over and cited in any way should have an opportunity to dispute it rather than just have to pay a fine. That's my opinion. I wanted to comment on the part about kids doing wheelies. I just would hate to be the city that has an ordinance that has violation for kids doing wheelies in their neighborhood and just riding and having a fun time. Also wanted to mention some positive things I think the city council could do, which is to encourage property managers to have plenty of bike racks on their property. For instance, the post office on Atlanta has 0 bicycle racks, and you ride your bike to the post office, there's no place to even lock it up. I could give you lots more examples, but I only have 56 seconds, so I want to make sure I get everything in. There is a section in there about 25 miles an hour being considered as a consideration of what could be poor bad riding. I'm not sure of the term. I ride on streets that are 40, 45 miles an hour speed limit, and I ride in the bike lane. I have 6,500 miles ridden on my bike in this last year, and 4,500 of those were ridden in the city of Huntington Beach. So I speak with some experience. I frequently ride faster than 25 miles an hour because I'm a strong rider and because I'm a safe rider. I have a motorcycle license. I know what I'm doing. And I don't think that the city should have a speed limit
10 seconds.
in general for bicycles. It should be in correlation with the speed limit where they're being operated. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for being here. Thank you. Next speaker, thanks so much for being here.
Good evening, Mayor Strickland and members of the City Council. My name is Russell Neal, and I live in Huntington Beach. I would like to speak tonight on the subject of human dignity. Human dignity derives from the fact that man is created in the image of God. When we do violence to any man, we do not only offend that man, but God who made him. In fact, the reason capital punishment for murder is required is because the murder victim carries God's image. I might add that character assassination by unfounded defamation is also a sin akin to murder, which God will judge accordingly. Furthermore, since we bear the image of God, we do violence to that image when we ourselves sin. We honor that image when we act in conformity with God's moral law. Knowing we each carry the image of God is not an occasion for pride, but for fear of desecrating that sacred image. We must also remember that the image of God is not just in the individual human person, but in the union of male and female in holy matrimony. The desecration of that holy union by various forms of sexual sin and transgression is an assault on the image of God, no less than is murder. To assert that those who conform to God's moral law and those who habitually violate it are deserving equal dignity and honor is a capital error. We are told in Scripture that government is sent by God for the punishment of evildoers and the praise of them that do well. And we are further told that if anyone defiles the temple of God, God will destroy him. For the temple of God is holy, which temple you are. If we want to uphold human dignity, therefore, we should not limit ourselves to issuing mere statements, but by conforming all of our personal conduct and all of our collective legislation to the moral law of God.
10 seconds.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Thank you. Next speaker, thanks for being here.
Thank you. My name is Perry Clitheroe, and I'm speaking about items 1 and 17. I'm thrilled to see this issue coming up. I've lived in Huntington Beach my whole life. I've ridden my bicycle on and off. I'll be honest, it's always horrified me. I ride the correct direction, and besides the fact that we don't have bike lanes on huge swaths of the city, I currently commute down Adams every day. I'd love to ride my bike every day to go to work in Costa Mesa. I'd love to not be part of the congestion and get in everyone else's way, but there's huge swaths where there's no bike lane. So I'm riding my Prius every day, and you have to get stuck behind me instead of me being on the side of the road. So I'm a huge fan of 1, even though I didn't see Adams on there, so I hope that gets addressed in the future. And on 17, I think the language might be a little vague, but I'm excited to see enforcement be a priority. Too many bicyclists. I think the biggest issue is they go the wrong way. I find that very frustrating as a rider when I'm going the right way, especially if it's a kid. I feel quite obligated to look and to put myself into the line of traffic when there's a kid coming at me, and to be honest, that freaks me the heck out. I feel like I'm playing the lottery every time I ride my bike, and it's not the kind of lottery my fiance enjoys. So I appreciate you guys giving attention to this issue. I do hope you continue to readdress it and maybe work on the language a little bit down the road, but I know that can be a work in progress, so I'm very supportive. Thank you all very much.
Thanks for being here. Thank you. Next speaker, thanks for being here.
Hi, my name is Neil. First, thanks to Mr. Neil for clearly illustrating the issues with the policy on human dignity. With supporters like that, I don't really know if you need detractors. So, as was highlighted last Thursday by a number of speakers, there's a clear lack of compelling justification for a number of the proposed charter amendments. I sincerely hope that with a week to prepare to respond to the questions regarding cost, legality, structure of elections and personnel, legal liability, and the evidence of any past fraud, there will be more consideration put into the next charter session. In addition to opposing the wasteful proposals for charter amendments to be on the upcoming ballot, or potentially, hopefully not, upcoming ballots, I want to again raise my concern regarding the city's lack of compliance with the state's housing regulations. We are set up to be engaged in multiple costly lawsuits against the state over the housing element, over attempts to preempt the builder's remedy, and the assertion that our status as a charter city will allow the city to override state legislation regarding housing policy. I don't know if you've been paying attention to the ongoing legislative session in the current state Senate, but this is not a winning strategy, and it's not in the best interests of Huntington Beach residents. As has been noted in recent sessions, we are headed towards a projected budget deficit. Do we really have the money to waste on costly litigation, including potentially more attorney's fees, awards of attorney's fees rather, like the Kennedy Center? How does this benefit residents? When a city loses, it will also lose any oversight over housing development ordered by the state. I would much rather see the city develop a productive housing plan now than throw away money fighting losing battles against the state on appeal against future developments. I also do want to note, regarding the bicycles, I think it's a good idea for us to look more at ways we can make the city more friendly to bikers, pedestrians, to non-vehicle traffic. I mean, we're in a great location. We have incredible beaches. We're Surf City, USA, and I think we really should be embracing that more, trying to make this a more, welcoming, a more open, a more available community. Again, with the housing thing, the less housing we have, the higher the prices are. I know homeowners love that. It's terrible for young people. Everyone has to move out because there's no housing available. The prices are so high, and that's really a shame. So I think that really we should make housing our primary focus, and we should look at ways to leverage that in the planning process and make sure that we can be involved. Because the alternative is, we lose a ton of money of lawsuits to the city, or to the state rather, and we lose all control over planning. And I mean, I don't know how many people would be happy to see 12-story buildings down by the beach. Personally, I would kind of love that, but I know that a lot of your constituents would really, really hate that, and they'd hate to lose the ability to have, any part of that process. So I hope you'll consider moving forward with the housing element on future, at least have some discussion on the council with it, and get things underway.
Thank you. Thank you. Next speaker, thanks so much for being here.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and honorable members of the City Council. My name is Ken Inoue. I'm a 50-year resident of Huntington Beach. Like many of the people here this evening, attended the first bylaw committee meeting. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for having that. But although the bylaw committee meeting didn't give us as much information as we like, it did produce some very significant facts. The fact that I think everybody in this room would like to know what the potential costs of the bylaws are. I think one of the things that's been missing in a lot of discussions by the City Council is developing a budget and a cost so that the people and even yourselves can understand the financial impact of decisions on our treasury. In addition, I made a special request at the meeting to have an accounting of fully, I guess, the free reserves that would be available for paid for these kind of costs, in addition to the other costs that the prior gentleman mentioned, because I do think we need to move forward in a fiscally responsible manner, because it does affect all of us if we should have financial problems in the future. Again, I look forward to a very productive session. I look forward to a very open dialogue. I hope that there'll be a lot of listening in terms of what people's opinions are. And I want to thank you so very much. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you. Next speaker, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. As I was sitting there, I was really appalled by the constant attacks on the four newest City Council members who we were calling the Fab Four. But there's so many names and so many slanderous issues being thrown their way that are not substantiated. But I wanted to also talk about some of the great things that they've done and successfully since they've been in office. I mean, they tackled the JPA, supposedly green energy, and saved us a lot of money and saved us a lot of problems down the road. They also saved the air show, which brings in $120 million of revenue to the local economy, which was ready to go somewhere else because of the lack of support they had here in Huntington Beach. And it was funny how when we talk about the Fab Four voting as a block, I never hear anybody saying anything about the three that vote as a block all the time, and no one says a thing about that. So I don't see them going back and forth. There's only very few issues where all seven look at the same thing the same way. But it's usually 4-3, but I never hear a complaint about the three block, which is a big issue. The flag issue. So the United States of America has had our flag since 1777. That's 246 years ago. That represents all of us. And if we can't see that, we have a problem. It's a banner that the whole world respects, at least they used to until just recently. And I think that we need to continue to look at it that way. But we just had that birthday, 9/3/1777. Also, we've allowed our city attorney to be able to fight the fight and fight for Huntington Beach without allowing Sacramento to just beat up on Huntington Beach and take shots of us and just let us just take things as they are, when constitutionally we're in the right. Also, when it comes to the charter, they're firming things up. There's some issues that need to be polished up. There's some problems, and they're addressing those issues. We might not all agree with them, but they're addressing some of these issues. They've also allowed HBPD to enforce the anti-camping laws. If you've noticed, there's less issues around the city with homeless. That doesn't mean it has gone away, but it's being addressed, and it's being tackled. It's really important that we look at that. Also, the mask mandates, without us being forced to have masks and being forced to have vaccines. It's absolutely ludicrous for someone to always stand up here and say, well, scientifically, it's been proven that they're successful. Well, show me one scientific data or one specific report, university report, that actually substantiates the mask. The mask, again, the virus is 1,000 times smaller than bacteria. The mask that Mr. Kalmick said a couple weeks ago that we didn't have a mask issue, we don't have a problem, and then all of a sudden he's wearing a mask again. That's like a chain link fence. That's like a mosquito it's like a chain link fence blocking a mosquito. It just does absolutely no good, but it's a sign of compliance. That's very good. Also, the library. There's no bans on the library books. There's guardrails. Okay, so we have to stop calling it a ban because that's not what it ever was, and it's not what it is. And so let's just be truthful. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. Thank you. Next speaker, thanks so much for being here.
Hello, Mayor, everyone else. Chief Para is supposed to be sitting down here every other week, and for the city council, and he's always gone. The seat's always empty. He's over here or somewhere else. Why is he not, he doesn't have to? This doesn't make any sense. Please, he should be over here like everybody else. Everybody else is responsible. The helicopter crash, they told us that Chief Paris said that he was going to be open and transparent, and I haven't seen neither, and it's been over a year and a half. And he still doesn't show what happened. And if somebody kills a cop, they're supposed to go to jail. They're supposed to, it's an execution. And I don't get this, there was a person, it wasn't the pilot was someone else, another cop, and he killed a hero, apparently, because you guys had a huge procession. And everybody protected that cop, nobody even knows who it is. I think that he's supposed to show us exactly what happened. He ends up getting 4 new helicopters. that we end up paying for? I mean, this is getting ridiculous. And they're playing, and the helicopters at night at 2 o'clock in the morning. I mean, come on, guys. Seriously? I mean, this isn't like Escape from New York. Or, I mean, helicopters all over the place in the middle of the night. And the drones, please, people, look up and see how many drones that they have. This is nuts. We got to stop them. This is nuts. They got allocated $20,000 worth of batteries every year for drones. You know how many drones that is for $20,000? I mean, and this is insane. Please, I mean, isn't he supposed to please have accountability and tell us exactly what happened with the helicopter? Because I know that the person, I mean, if I killed Superman because I got stoned or something, and then I killed a hero, I'd be responsible and I'd pay the price. But I mean, hiding the person and then pretending that he's the pilot, that doesn't make any sense. That isn't right. We got to make sure that everything's, I mean, this is fair. I mean, and equitable. Everyone is equal. If he's done something wrong, let him account. It's been a year and a half, guys. And then, seriously, please, and the helicopters, 2 o'clock in the morning, come on. Seriously, they did it. They did it for a couple of weeks. It's a psyop, where what they do is that they have them up in the air for a long time, for 7 days straight, and then after that, they cut down to nothing. And then they do it again a couple of weeks later, and then so you get acclimated to this. And then pretty soon they're up all night. Why? I mean, when I called up and asked.
10 seconds.
When I asked, they said, it's police activity. How long do they have to be up? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, last call for Gina Clayton-Tarvin and Patricia Pappas.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. I'm Gina Clayton-Tarvin. I'm the Vice President of the Ocean View School District Board of Trustees, a 27-year teacher, a mother of 2, and a 30-year resident of Huntington Beach. I'm here this evening for 3 very important reasons. Number 1, to share my abject displeasure with your mishandling of the proposed charter amendments. As you know, the Ocean View School District has sent a letter expressing our deep concern regarding the charter amendments, and we urge you to disband your actions to place the amendments on the primary ballot in March 2024. You promised the residents of Huntington Beach that you would protect the charter at all costs. And you, Gracie Vandermark, specifically list this promise on your website in bright red text. Audience, please get out your phones and Google her website to view her broken promise. She lists protect the city charter as her #1 priority, and here we are just months after the election, and she's already broken her promise. You, Ms. Vandermark, you, Mr. Strickland, you, Mr. McKeon, and the missing Mr. Burns, you're all missing the point. You're breaking your own promises to the voters. We see you, and we will hold you accountable. Number 2, I'm suing the city of Huntington Beach and City Attorney Michael Gates specifically for failure to provide me with the airshow settlement document. I filed a California Public Records request for the document and was refused by City Attorney Gates' office. Mr. Gates himself claimed on the record during a recent update at the Senior Center that releasing the document could compromise this city's litigation against the oil spill perpetrators. The problem is, no such lawsuit exists. You have run out of excuses for denying the people. Please produce the settlement document so we can see exactly what you have gifted your friend and campaign benefactor, Mr. Kevin Elliott. Please follow California law. It is not that difficult. We see you, and you will be held accountable. Third and last, Mayor Strickland, I must address your complete lack of understanding of how to run a public meeting. I recently learned something quite telling. I learned that the city clerk's office writes you a script for every meeting for you to follow for the entire meeting up at the dais. What's unreal is that you repeatedly tout your past state legislative expertise in the Assembly and Senate,
10
yet
seconds.
you do not understand the basics of Robert's rules and parliamentary procedures. We see you, and we will hold you accountable.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. Next speaker, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here to speak with you, honorable council members. I'm Patricia Pappas, lived here more than 43 years, and I had no idea that I lived with, there's a lot of people that are not telling the truth, and a lot of people that come up here and speak at this podium. So I thought I would kind of get up here for a couple of minutes. When I got involved in this work actually got involved in the recall. I had just retired from a college professorship, and I was a big volunteer in schools, and I thought, I heard something about there was a bond purchased in our city, and it was not purchased, it was not voted on by the members of our community. Now, my experience as a teacher, we always had to vote on the bonds. So that really bothered me. I became involved, and I learned through the process that we were losing about, I think it's in taxes. The other council purchased, I guess they thought they were, I don't know what they thought, but they purchased these 2 buildings. And because of the way that they did it, there wasn't a vote, and also we were losing $500,000 in taxes every year, okay? So when I'm looking at this charter amendments that are coming up, I'm thinking we've lost a lot more than it's gonna cost to put the charters on the ballot. Lots. The other thing that I was thinking about is voter election and having people show their ID. At the last election, I went to the Orange County Register of Voters and worked just for a day, but as an observer. And what I observed is I watched, first of all, people need to sign their ballots correctly. I watched many people working. I watched one group pass one ballot to 6 different people because they could not tell if this signature was correct or not. I saw them looking at, oh my gosh, computers. It was just a mess. They were sending ballots back to people. They were showing up at people's homes to check their signature. We need voter signature, even if Huntington Beach is just the example. Library books, people are saying they're not pornographic and obscene. I've looked, we've looked, we have a whole team of people. They're down on the low shelves for the children. It's a really scary process. We are not, a group is not banning books.
10 seconds.
Not banning books, but looking seriously at what needs to be done. And then I just appreciate it. I can walk downtown with my husband now and not be worried.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
That concludes public comments.
Okay. So members, let's go down the agenda. Council committee appointments. Does any member have anything to announce? Seeing none. AB 1, 2, 3, 4 reporting. Anybody have anything to report? Seeing none. Openness and negotiation disclosures.
Yes, Mayor, I met with the Firefighters Association on September 15th.
I also met with the reps from the Huntington Beach Firefighters Association. Anything else? Seeing none. City Manager, please introduce your report on file item 8.
Thank you, Mayor Strickland, members of the council. This evening, Lieutenant Brian Smith and Jessica Kelly, Social Services Supervisor, will be presenting to you a quarterly report on homeless.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Zlinka. Honorable Mayor and Council, I'm here to present an update on the city's homeless response covering the second quarter of 2023. While our teams have made great progress, I will utilize this time to highlight some of the efforts and areas of focus. In April, at the request of the City Council, I presented a plan to address homelessness in our community, with an emphasis on 3 areas: improving communications, auditing our programs, and increased focused outreach efforts. Improving communications with the community will be one element we must continually explore and expand upon. I've worked with city staff to update information on the HB Homeless Solutions website, and our goal is to consolidate the Homeless Solutions site with the city's governmental site to make it a one-stop shop.
Lieutenant Smith?
Yes.
Sorry, do you guys mind, because this is like really important, this presentation is part of the rolling 90-day plan on homelessness. I think it'd be more efficient if we ask questions while he's going through it than going backwards. Are you guys okay with that? Really? All right. Okay.
Some examples of what we've done to improve communications include placing messaging and water billing statements regarding our homeless services, collaborating with the Downtown Business Improvement District to increase awareness of resources, monthly collaborative meetings with city and county resources, whom we work with to address homeless-related issues. We started quarterly collaborative meetings to bring together our local groups actively involved in addressing homelessness and our vulnerable populations within the community. We also participated in a community cafe event where we held a neighborly conversation about homelessness, a discussion which led to us hosting the National Alliance on Mental Illness Orange County in our own voice presentation. One significant element of our plan was the business outreach conducted by the Police Department's Homeless Task Force. Business outreach is important because we need the assistance of those responsible for private properties to address issues occurring on their properties. As an example, a private homeowner can permit or exclude somebody from sitting in their front yard. We, as the police department, cannot prohibit or take enforcement action unless somebody responsible for the property states an individual cannot be on their property and they support prosecutions should the individual not leave after being requested to do so. This holds true for private commercial properties as well, especially locations open to the general public, and it presents challenges on businesses that are open for 24 hours a day. During the visits, officers discussed current issues, including issues occurring on or around that specific property, the rights of property owners, and crime prevention through environmental design. During the second quarter, officers visited over 100 properties, and during that same time, we received over 123 illegal lodging and trespassing enforcement letters for private property in our city. As of July 1st, we had 272 active letters on file, a 50% increase from the same time last year. Next. In regards to increased focused outreach efforts, staff has been engaging in regular case conferencing with Mercy House staff in the Huntington Beach Navigation Center. We have utilized overtime to help facilitate client support outside of our traditional working hours. We filled 2 vacancies within our social services unit, increasing our ability to serve the community. We also reached out to the Orange County Healthcare Agency to seek support in addressing mental health care and outreach efforts in our city. I've been to other regional meetings and everybody is asking for more support from the county. But through our efforts, we're able to secure additional Orange County Psychiatric Emergency Response Team, PERT, clinician staffing from 1 shift a week to 2 shifts per week. During these shifts, clinicians ride with officers and assist in a variety of ways. The county's outreach and engagement team also increased their dedicated staffing availability from 1 shift per week to 1.5. Another step we took was sending all of the police department's downtown patrol unit officers to a certified homeless liaison officer course, which makes them more prepared to interact with our unhoused community. Additionally, the HB Cares program now has 18 trained and vetted volunteers. Lastly, one item I'm excited about the prospects of is city staff met with Cal Optima to discuss expansion of their street medicine program, which is currently being tested in Garden Grove. It will offer preventative services to Cal Optima clients within the city, reducing the impacts on emergency services and improving quality of life for those users. While selection of participating cities will be done through a competitive process, I believe we as a city have demonstrated our commitment to assisting the vulnerable populations, making us an ideal candidate for this program. Next. Auditing our programs. While auditing our programs, we identified a case management system for our social services team, which is currently being utilized by the North Orange County Collaborative. We are working with the city's Information Services Division to integrate this program into our structure. Regarding Be Well, since the city began using Be Well Mobile Crisis Response Team, data tracking and management was being handled by one of our amazing staff members, Celeste Coggins, in planning administration. However, this was a role in addition to her regular duties. We recently transitioned her duties into our unit under Homeless and Behavioral Health Services, where staff can more easily identify data collection needs from a social services perspective. At the time I created this slide, our Be Well Mobile Crisis Response Team was down one team. However, I'm happy to announce we are now fully staffed, and Be Well is providing 7-day-a-week coverage, 21-hour a day, covering from 6 a.m. till 3 a.m. the following day. Just for the community's awareness, one reason it's taken so long to get to that point is we as a city require a robust background investigation for all Be Well staff, similar to what we put police officers through, which even for somebody with a pristine background takes some time. We do this because we want to trust that the right people are engaged in our community. While reviewing our team's performance, we did identify that transports were being underreported, and this was simply due to unclear definitions. This has been rectified, and disposition codes have been clearly defined. Mercy House, who operates our navigation center, we've had 2 meetings with their CEO to address concerns such as timely invoicing, neighborhood outreach patrols, and increasing successful exits to housing opportunities, as well as getting our volunteers into the navigation center. Through our discussions, we realized some of these issues were related to turnover of staff, while some were outside the scope of their duties that were impacting the barriers that they were facing. Invoicing was also several months behind, but thanks to our city's community development staff, they worked closely with Mercy House one-on-one to complete the complex billing and reporting needed by our funding sources. Increasing exits is an area where we continually work on. At the end of this presentation, Social Services Supervisor Jessica Kelly will discuss some of the barriers impacting the ability to get people into housing. However, one component that we are steadfast on is ensuring Mercy House is holding clients accountable to their individual plans. And we've also started getting our volunteers in the navigation center, which is receiving positive feedback from the clients. One area I'd like to address, not listed on the original plan, is advocacy and funding. I would like to thank staff and our city council for recognizing the importance of our programs and actively advocating for funding and support at all levels, including communications with other elected officials at all levels, reaching out to third-party service providers, speaking at community meetings, and even offering to personally assist with our outreach efforts to our business community. Some of the highlights that directly impact our taxpaying community include staff meeting with our federal SAMHSA grant coordinators and receiving an extension into fiscal year 23-24, which helps offset cost for our Be Well Mobile Crisis Response Team. The grant allows us to fund up to 40% of our covered program cost. However, since our costs were kept down over the first year, or over last year, we only used about $300,000 of this grant. This extension allows us to utilize the remaining funds in the upcoming fiscal year, again, saving our community money. We also received notification that $1.1 million in funding was secured from the state of California to support operations at the Huntington Beach Navigation Center. As noted by Mayor Strickland in past council meeting, this was done through the efforts of Senator Daveman and Councilmember Kalnick. From the police department, although our overall calls for service increased, which is expected as we transition into the summer, we actually saw a slight reduction in calls for service involving individuals experiencing homelessness over the first quarter of 2023. Our homeless task force officers, which again is comprised of 4 officers, made 543 contacts, resulting in 40 navigation center referrals, 10 referrals to other shelters, and 2 subjects were transported to crisis stabilization units. They handled 135 MyHB complaints, which range from property left in public spaces, requests for assistance on private property, to notifications of individuals that may be in need of our assistance. Our homeless and behavioral health services team had an 11% increase in contacts from the first quarter, while referrals to the shelters went down. This reduction can be attributed to our efforts in the first quarter of 2023 to get individuals into the shelters once COVID restrictions were lifted countywide. And shelter referrals take additional time and dedication of staff over non-shelter referral contacts. As a reminder just to our community, our team assists those at risk of being homeless or those experiencing homeless, and we cannot compel anyone to accept any of our services, including shelter. Our Be Well Mobile Crisis Response Team assisted 434 unique individuals during the second quarter. Be Well is not a homeless-specific service. However, they do provide services to our unhoused community. 60% of BWell's calls handled through requests from the community and our public safety partners involved individuals experiencing homelessness. Between calls for service, instead of having the team wait for calls to come in, we ask that they proactively check locations throughout the city where individuals may be in need of assistance, including areas such as our public parks, Pier Plaza, and our city beaches. Through these efforts, they made 1,287 total contacts, 93% of which involved individuals experiencing homelessness. In all instances, 91% of BWell services did not require a co-response from public safety resources, keeping those resources available to provide services to our community. The Huntington Beach Navigation Center had an average capacity of 95%. While we have been operating at or near maximum capacity, we do have the ability to refer clients to other service providers, such as the Yale Navigation Center. In the second quarter, 5 clients were housed, and while that number appears low, there are barriers impacting the number which we're working to address. I can give an update that last month alone, we had 4 individuals housed out of the Navigation Center into some housing. And that's just by the Navigation Center staff, not including our social services staff. While the ultimate goal is to keep people housed and self-supportive, the Navigation Center assists in other ways and helps reduce the impact of homelessness on our community, the clients, and community resources. I've been asked what would happen if we didn't have a Navigation Center. One easy representation of this impact would be if we did not operate the Navigation Center, we would have an immediate increase of 6.5 unsheltered individuals per square mile. Next. And for barriers, I'd like to ask Social Services Supervisor Jessica Kelly to discuss the barriers we are facing when it comes to housing clients, as well as to share some of our success stories. Thank you.
Some barriers to housing stability are finding landlords who are willing to accept the vouchers. When they are accepting vouchers, they're still requiring tenants to make 2 to 3 times, for their income to be 2 to 3 times the rent, even though rent is guaranteed. Credit scores are also factored with the vouchers. Another barrier is individuals matched to rapid rehousing through third-party organizations are told their income is not sufficient for the units that the organizations are having them view after being matched. Finding support for the clients who are newly housed while they assimilate back into society is another barrier. The first couple of months are crucial after somebody is newly housed, and there are not enough services to assist them during that time. Lack of communication between outside organizations and accountability for follow-up is also a barrier. Some success stories over this quarter. We worked with a veteran who is a senior citizen. He had poor physical health and was a high utilizer of emergency services. He was connected to a housing opportunity through the VA. It also came with supportive services, and our social worker connected him back to his Social Security benefits. He is now housed in his apartment and has a steady income coming in. Proactive engagement of a 73-year-old female sleeping on a bus bench in Sunset Beach. We were able to get her housed within 2 weeks. We used the senior housing placement hotline, and they placed her into a room for rent based off of her income. Collaborative assistance between city and local faith-based groups to assist a formerly homeless adult at risk of eviction due to unpaid utilities. We also worked on a budget plan with him before we utilized this faith-based group so he could continue to pay his utilities moving forward. Senior center staff, homeless social workers, and local faith-based group assisted a couple living in their vehicle with locating a housing opportunity. They were referred to the senior center for food and hygiene items, and as well to their resource center to look in their rental binder where they found a room for rent. We contacted the faith-based group, and they were able to pay their move-in costs. So they are now housed.
What I appreciate is through each of those success stories is utilization of different services that are out there in the community that work together with our team to accomplish what our goal is of getting people into housing and to be self-sufficient. And that's on a huge effort from our community and one of the benefits of having our own team. Next slide, please. Overall, with all of your support, our team is making a positive impact on the entire community, including housed, unhoused, our business community, and visitors alike. And we look forward to continuing our collaborative efforts to address the impacts of homelessness. Thank you for your time.
Councilman McKeon, you had a question? Oh, go ahead. Okay.
I'll start. First of all, thank you for putting this together and for all the work you do. When we first were elected, we kept getting emails about people not feeling safe downtown, people not feeling safe going to the park. And although there is a problem, it's going to take a while for things to get really settled down. There has been a significant difference. Our police department has gone above and beyond to make sure that they respond to some of these calls. We get pictures. When we forward them to you guys, thank you so much for getting people out there. It's noticed, the community's talking about it. So I couldn't be any happier. Also, one of the residents that was housed, that success story, to see the look in her face of how happy she was to finally have a home outside the shelter was priceless. So thank you for taking care of that as well. I did have a question. On one of your slides, number 8, you said the number of homeless went down. To what do you attribute that decline? It was page, hold on, let me see. Thought it was 8. So they handled, I'm sorry, the number of calls, 1,881 calls, and then the numbers went down from 1906 in the first quarter. To what do you think factored into that?
It's more of anecdotal belief, but I think it's all of our efforts together, all of our teams between social services and our public safety teams, getting out there and making the impact is having an overall impact on calls for service.
So more than likely, you guys being proactive and taking care of things before the calls are placed?
Yes,
Could be.
and that comes from, as I said, Be Well, social services, all the resources we have reduces that calls and then keeps our officers and our fire personnel, marine safety available to handle the community's needs.
Thank you. And are we still working on trying to put together some kind of a work program? Is that still being researched?
So we are still exploring several programs. Most of them do come with a cost, and we understand we have to be a steward of the community's money. So we're trying to find alternative ways and ways we could fund those, which there are potentially some grants down the road that we could use to fund those programs that would get people out of the navigation center into the workforce and doing programs in our community.
Okay. Well, thank you again. I mean, sorry I keep sending you the pictures, but the minute people send them to us, we forward them to you, and thank you for taking care of that right away.
Thank you.
Members?
Thank you, Lieutenant Smith. It's a lot of work to put this together. I know a lot of residents recently have said that we're not focused on issues like the homelessness, but we do so on a daily basis. I think I talk to you almost daily. So like the Mayor Pro Tem said, just from feedback we've gotten from the community, and I think the eye test, we're having positive results. Of course, there's a lot of work to be done. It's a very complicated issue, but we work tirelessly at it every single day. So if you don't mind to go through the presentation, can you actually put it back up on the screen for the viewers at home to look at it? And then can you guys go to slide 3? So just on the city's website, when do you guys think that'll be done in terms of updating it?
The city's currently in transition process of switching websites.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what that timeline is, but we can get back to you on
Okay,
that.
just roughly. I'm just, a lot of questions here. And then, are you guys gonna use the dashboard that was used previously?
Yes, that was updated yesterday.
Okay.
There was a slight delay when we did do the transition over to homeless behavioral health services. Another thing we're doing is previously, the service providers would send us the data and we would create the charts.
Okay.
We've been working with the service providers to give us a product that is ready to present to the community to save staff that time so we're not reduplicating their work and creating more work so that we have more available time to focus on our primary duties.
Okay, because I know one of the real big challenges is just coming up with these metrics that we can measure. So is this dashboard gonna have metrics on the website that people can see?
The data's already up there that shows
Okay.
our contacts and everything. What's hard with defined metrics is what are we comparing them to?
Right.
For instance, other cities are seeing doubling, tripling of their population and needs for services. So it's hard to compare. We will do comparative of showing what's going on in our city. However, it will be cyclical. as it's going to be expected to increase in the summer months, decrease in the winter months.
On this slide, you have a bullet point on standardized definition of terms. So like what terms are standardized and then who uses them? So like is the Homeless Task Force, Navigation Center, and Be Well all using the same standardized terms?
So what I did was we're in the process of creating operations manual for all of our teams.
Okay.
And in it, the first key component we worked on, and that was at the request of the council, was getting the standardized definitions established for a lot of the common terms that are used across the board, so we can share that with all of our partners and ensure they are using the same definitions for the same terms.
Perfect. Let's see. You have on the commence quarterly community meetings, like who's involved with this, and is that information available to the public? So can we participate?
So we get together a lot of the faith-based and community groups that are actively engaged in assisting the homeless and our at-risk communities and bring them together. It's an invitation that's sent out through our volunteer services coordinator.
Okay.
And if anybody would like to participate in that, they can just get a hold of our volunteer services coordinator, Virginia Clara, and she can assist.
Perfect. Business outreach. Is there any more involvement from the city prosecutor with those individuals that are, resisting service, like repeat offenders, et cetera?
Yes, we have a great relationship with our community prosecutor. In fact, tomorrow morning we have our monthly meeting with them to review successes, what's working, what's not, and to see how things are working. And it's been very successful.
Good.
And we're seeing a lot of successes even at getting alternative sentencing. As if somebody is successful in getting in the navigation center and getting assistance, that we're able to assist them with some of those open cases they had that were related to their housing status.
Okay. Can you guys go to slide 5? So you have the filling of the 2 vacancies. I guess what's the current staffing level for the task force, case managers, and then Be Well? And then I guess are these the ultimate goal levels? Why or why not?
Yeah, the only thing we're lacking right now, we're in the testing process of, is a homeless services manager, which will be essentially my counterpart on the city side, managing the social services. That recruitment, it's done, we're in the middle of the testing, and hopefully that decision will be made within a couple weeks. And I think in the future, I have visions of where I think we could take our program of having somebody specializing in our transitional age youth, one person's focusing on our senior community at risk, which is a real vulnerable community, just to kind of help bifurcate those resources to make sure we have specialized services.
And I think the end goal should be to shrink this department as much as possible because we're having success, obviously, of addressing this problem, and so it's not just continuing. So that's just something me personally, I think the goal shouldn't be to bloat this department, but eventually shrink it because the numbers are getting smaller, hopefully. On the HB Cares volunteers, can you explain what the roles of those volunteers are?
So one of the vital roles that they do is they help with our hotline that's coming in. So all the calls that come into the homeless services and our social services, they do the initial reception of the calls and help connect people with services that might not necessarily need to do one-on-ones with our social workers.
Okay.
And they triage those calls.
What about the dispatch number? Is that their answer as well, or is that through the police department?
That the dispatch number is different than the social
Okay.
services hotline we have. I don't have that number offhand.
It's okay.
But we can get, it's on the website. I'm sorry, what was the?
No, that's fine. And then for the public, I always tell them if they see something in the community to call the dispatch number. Can you say what that number is?
Yes, 714-960-8825. And one of my goals was always to have where the community shouldn't be triaging who they call.
Right.
So if they just call our police communications, the communications operator will ask them questions about what the situation is and then attempt to identify what the best resource is for that, whether it's connecting to social services, Be Well, or another entity.
Perfect. Can you guys go to slide 6? Let's see. So the outreach grid case management, can you just provide further details about what this is and then what it?
So Outreach Grid is a system that was developed specifically for case management. What's nice about this program and is if we are able to get on with the North Orange County Collaborative, it'll really create a network of information sharing amongst the 13 North Orange County cities that participate in that,
Nice.
which isn't what you traditionally think of North Orange County. It includes Stanton, and north, all the way up to Fullerton and around. So it'll really link all of our resources because our unhoused community is transient by nature, that they go around between the cities. So it'll give us a network of resources to help determine what's the appropriate services for everyone. Additionally, it'll help pull metrics for us, be able to show us heat maps, where our services are utilized. It's going to be a great tool for documenting our activities and what we're seeing out there, geotagging, adding photographs, and just make it easier to pull the information. Currently, everything has to be hand-pulled and managed, so it'll be savings for personnel.
They said the data management was moved from planning to behavioral health services. So why was this moved, and then who is the person managing the data?
So initially, it was just placed on Celeste Coggins, who had been doing it when all the programs were starting up. She's very great at data management and making the products that are on the websites. But we felt it's more appropriate to have somebody in our social services team that can look at it from the social services aspect and see what data do we need to capture, what's useful, and what more do we need to capture. And so one of our social workers, Annabelle Garcia, offered to assist with that, is very analytical and thrives off data. So she has taken on that responsibility, and I'm very confident in our team of handling that.
To me, that's like a really important part, because if we're going to be able to analyze if we're having success, the data needs to be consistent. So is that a top priority for her to make sure that all that data is consistent?
Yes, she's already identifying areas where we can improve and increase our data collection. And what's nice is when we do go to Outreach Grid, that'll help a lot because it is a standardized format utilized by other cities within our county already.
Yeah, it's perfect. Like you said, the standardize is key. Be well, how many vans do we have right now?
We've always had 2 vans, and for a while we only had 3 teams. We were covering up to 6 days a week, the 21 hours a day. Then the final day on Wednesdays, we only had 10 hours. We currently have the 7-day-a-week, 21-hour-a-day coverage. So we have 1 van that operates from 6 a.m. till 6 p.m. The second van comes on at 3 p.m. and works until 3 a.m.
And then, we always get questions from the community about like what they do. And I've mentioned before, I was with you on their campus, and I believe it's Orange. I was very impressed because it's like a private sector solution to this problem. So can you kind of walk the residents through how they take a big burden off the police department, especially when individuals have to go to the hospital, so you guys aren't having wall time?
Yeah, they assist us in many ways. They're a crisis response team to help people in moments of crisis, to help bridge them to appropriate services. And that may be just sitting down, talking to the person, counseling, or giving counsel, or transporting them to one of the crisis stabilization units within the county, or their own Be Well campus where they can get sober and detox. They're also utilized a lot in our schools and throughout the community to really handle those calls that I think we all looked at, and the community probably looked at and go, why is this a police officer's call? Why is this a firefighter's call? For instance, if somebody's laying on a bus bench, that used to be a call that would most of the time generate a response from 2 police officers and a fire engine, and which is the 4 firefighter, engineer, captain, firefighter, paramedics. That was a significant response and would utilize our resources. Whereas now our Be Well mobile crisis response team can go in there and identify what is the problem if it does need a formal or more formal response from our public safety resources.
And I've talked with Supervisor Wagner about this. The county views them very favorably as well, and so they're looking to really kind of embolden them. I know they're building like a 20-acre campus in Irvine, so it's having a good success of taking that burden off of you guys. To the same slide on the navigation center, what are some of the services and on-site providers that are available at the center?
You want to take this one?
At the Navigation Center, they have a SOS mobile medical van come out every Friday. They also help clients get vital docs. They utilize the HMIS system to connect them to housing opportunities. They connect them to mental health services. They had a homeless court came out on site and saw people. We want to continue that
What is that?
So homeless court is an alternative sentencing program or alternative program through the Orange County court system. And previously, the individuals would petition to have their case heard in homeless court. And it would help connect them to services, hold them accountable, and help them get through their cases. Homeless Court is now offering services where they are coming to the Navigation Center to help those that might have misdemeanor cases, and they assist them through that process and can handle it there on site, saving the individual from either having to go to wherever the jurisdiction was, whether it's Westminster, Harbor, North Court, and Fullerton.
Do you guys think we'll continue to grow the amount of service providers?
Yes, that is our goal, and we're working with Mercy House to expand those. And I know that's one of Chief Paro's primary goals is constantly to ask us, hey, what are you guys doing and what are we going to do more of?
Because I believe like the more services we have on site, the more people are going to be able to navigate through the system, right?
Yes, definitely.
Do you guys have roughly like how many people have been turned away from a referral because the center is full? Does that happen often?
We don't have that number offhand. It's typically if our center's full, we will offer to refer them out to the Yale Navigation Center or one of the other sites.
Okay.
But
yeah, we just want to prevent them from navigating through if it's full. And then what's the maximum amount of length of time they're allowed to stay at the Navigation Center? Is it still 6 months?
So 6 months with extensions, as long as they are working toward their plan.
Okay.
We have been successful at reducing the number. When in January, I think when we first looked at it, there was some that had been in there since the shelter Navigation Center opened.
Right.
Those numbers have gone down drastically.
Do you know what the average stay is roughly?
I do not have that offhand.
Okay. I mean, obviously the goal is to get them through to the services. And I guess people have questions about this, but what are we using to confirm a connection to the city for the individuals?
So we look at a variety. It can be if they can show pay stubs, mailing addresses, a call to verify relatives that are here, and then our general knowledge of persons when we frequently encounter them in different situations.
Because we've had some residents say they don't understand why you just can't go to the Navigation Center. Can you explain why you should go to the intake at the police department to verify that first?
So there's several reasons why we don't want people walking up to the Navigation Center. First and foremost is to ensure that it is an appropriate facility for them to come in through our social workers, and we will match them up to the appropriate service provider that would be the best service for them. It may be Illumination Foundation, one of the county programs. There's several out there. Second is the impact on the community. We do not want to set up a situation where people are loitering in the area waiting for a bed, as that would have a negative impact on the surrounding area in general. And overall, it's just being able to do that verification and limit the impact on the operations of the Navigation Center itself. I've had people make the comments that it doesn't look like there's anybody in there, it looks empty. That's our goal.
Right.
That means it's being successful, not making a negative impact on the community.
Right. And then what happens if the individual does not have a connection to the city?
That's when our social workers will work with them and try to find an appropriate facility. And we've had success getting people referred even into LA County services all throughout Orange County. We don't just limit it to Huntington Beach only.
Okay. Slide 7. What's the annual city budget allocated to homeless behavioral services, and is this amount more or less than last year?
I would have to go back through the budget presentation. I don't have those numbers with me.
I mean, do you think it's roughly more or less?
I don't have any idea.
We'll come back with that. And then, with Tony's help, we'll continue to advocate for state bills that help address, these issues like you guys mentioned. Slide 8, second quarter. Gracie touched on this a bit, but calls for service are down slightly, but the MyHB complaints are up 8%. What do you guys attribute this to?
Awareness.
Awareness, yeah.
Of education, of getting the word out to the community. We've done some social media posts about that as well.
Nice.
Just showing the benefits of it. Recently, there was one on the police department's website about to clean up the railroad tracks that was specifically due to a community report via MyHB.
Okay. Let's see. Is the 11% calls for service, is that more or less than the last quarter?
That's about average. This whole year, it's ranged from 10.3% in January to 13% in March, and then it decreased down. Actually, July, it went down to 9.9%.
Okay. Slide 9. You touched on the decrease in Navigation Center referrals. But I guess why the decrease in referrals to other shelters, in your guys' opinion?
I think it all comes down to our efforts that first quarter
Yeah.
to get people housed that were willing to accept it. Since then, it's been more of those that we were putting the directed effort to, that might be resistant, unsure, uncomfortable, and it takes some time to get people comfortable with accepting the assistance and wanting to reside in a congregate setting.
Okay. And then on that chart, you guys are showing that the unduplicated contacts, are these all fresh unduplicated contacts per month?
No, that's all month to month unduplicated, so somebody could come to us in January, February, March, and we still can do continued case management with those that are in the navigation center. Sometimes they come up for additional referrals or to ask questions about other service providers out there.
Okay. And you said you guys facilitated housing for 6 individuals. Are these the 6 that were part of the 5 that are counted in Mercy House's number on page 10, or are these separate?
Separate. That's directly from our social services team.
Okay. The 13 individuals in detox facility, how do we increase this number? And then does it ever happen where people that are interested in going to the detox facility can't get an available bed?
So that has happened. Some of the times there are requirements that if they are too intoxicated or too impaired, that they need to go to emergency medical facility first because that's the appropriate facility to get them to a point where they could go into it. These are all voluntary programs.
Okay.
So again, they have to be willing to accept it to get in there.
So probably just do Be Well maybe to encourage more.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's between Be Well, our staff on the streets, including social services officers and fighter paramedics that do that outreach and encourage people to seek those services. Because if they go through one of the crisis stabilization units or Be Well, there are additional services connected to that. So they're not just in there to sober up and kicked on the street.
Right.
They are connected to other services.
Okay. Slide 10, Be Well. Can we get a breakdown of the services that are provided as it relates to that 1,825? Do you guys have that information?
I don't believe I have the total breakdown on hand with me, other than I have the transports. I do have for July, I have those that services were provided to 24%, which is resources or referrals. 218 was just initiating contacts where the individuals didn't want anything else. 73 transports. Supplies provided to 17.69%. 10.9% refused services from them. And 21% of the calls that they were dispatched to, subjects were gone upon their arrival, which that typically would have been the community calling in saying, hey, there's somebody that appears they need assistance.
Right.
By the time they get there, there's nobody there. However, their average response time is 10 minutes. So that's a fairly quick turnaround on anybody's standards.
No, that's a good breakdown of their services. And then roughly, do you know the percentage of their contacts that require follow-up?
I do not have that number.
Okay. Just again, trying to find metrics that we can measure from. Last slide 11, provided 2,742 supportive services. Can you kind of describe what those services are?
So that is the housing navigation, the meeting with medical services, county providers, ePath, different programs that are out there. And so clients can go to multiple programs throughout the year or throughout the month. And so that's why that number does look high, but they do receive multiple services per client.
Okay, and then you guys mentioned the House 5 clients. Are these part of the Homeless Task Force clients, or are these fresh?
Independent clients,
Nice.
yes.
Okay.
And as I said, we've already surpassed that number
And then
last month.
people have some questions. Just can we get a quick update on the Jamboree process, for the long-term plans of the Navigation Center, where they are currently?
We are actually meeting with Jamboree Housing tomorrow to discuss conceptual ideas of that project moving forward based upon the council's direction.
Okay. And then do we have any rental assistance programs? I've been talking to some people this could be perfect for someone that has a job, they've been placed in a house, and then prevents them from slipping back into homelessness in order to break that cycle. Do we have a program like that?
There is some programs that are handled outside of our unit.
Okay. By who though? Like the county?
No, the city itself.
Okay. And then just kind of touched on it earlier, just how do we maintain maximum success and efficiency without bloating this department? I think these metrics and these standardized terms, how can we continue to really look back and make sure that we're having success and getting this number down? What do you think?
think we just have to keep steadfast,
Yeah.
moving forward, doing our efforts. We have a great team that is dedicated to this mission, to the purpose, just supporting them and letting the numbers, the results, or speak for themselves and what the community is seeing. It is going to be there's always going to be a fluctuation in the numbers. We're not going to be able to,
Sure.
get down to that zero, but getting to functional zero is our goal, so that we have those services in place.
And like Gracie touched on, I would just really appreciate all your guys' work. It's, we get calls every single day, and people are pleased, and I know you guys are working around the clock to have impact. And I just really think when we get these standardized terms and these metrics consistent across all the different groups, that we're going to be able to look back and measure if we're having positive results besides just the eye test. So thank you guys, and I appreciate you bearing with me to go through all these items.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Councilman. Oh, I'm sorry. Who wants to go first?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my questions relate to pages 8 and 9 on your presentation. So if you could go back to slide 8. For the 543 contacts, it basically shows that 52 of them were referred elsewhere. So what happens with those other contacts? Can you give me some examples of what happens?
So the disposition of those contacts could vary. It could be enforcement action, it could be warnings, it could just be outreach to try to build those relationships, to build that trust so they are accepting of services.
Okay, thank you. On slide 9, on the table on the bottom right, I just wanted to clarify something. If you interacted with a person, say, who was a veteran and over age 62, would they be counted once or twice in that chart?
Twice.
Okay.
Yeah, we would qualify them for both.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Just to follow up, and so it would be 3 times, it would be veteran over 62, male or female.
Yes, and one thing to note is the homeless numbers, again, we do help those that are at risk of homeless, so that does impact that number as well.
Who's up next?
Thank you, staff, for producing this quarterly report. I think it's obviously extremely important for the residents to understand what the city council and staff have been working on for many years to try to resolve a systemic issue that's happening across the country. I think it was somewhat addressed, but the progress of the biggest barrier I think you had up there was moving folks out of the navigation center. Like, we've got several kind of spinning plates, and obviously housing affordability, mental health, the number of things cause folks to fall into homelessness, and so if we can keep people housed, obviously it seems very important. The tenant-based rental assistance program, which is on our consent calendar for a little bit later tonight, I think is the item that may be outside your department that I think you were reaching for. Okay. But that's pretty maxed out, right? We hit the top on that. I think we can talk about that if that gets pulled from the agenda. The other barrier would be housing, right? That the navigation center numbers tend to be high and folks are staying there a long time because we're having trouble finding housing for them. Is that correct?
Correct, finding appropriate housing, and when they do get vouchers, finding places that will accept them based upon their credit history, the amount of money that'll be the vouchers will cover. And then just overall, there's a stigma that's out there that people are hesitant to open their rental units to individuals that have been experiencing homelessness.
Right.
Even though most of them, once you get to know people, there's professionals, educated individuals, that it's not it's the stereotypical image. And I hate to even bring that up, but people have this image in their mind of what they are, and that's not what we see a lot of.
Right, right. I mean, rent being like $3,000 a month for that, showing up with $9,000 in income a month seems a little aggressive for someone that's unhoused currently. The status of converting the navigation that you talked about, Jamboree, a little bit. We talked about having some of these services, and with Be Well Campus, obviously, that was something that was contemplated for Beach Boulevard there. And the fact that people aren't even asking, I get asked all the time, what's that tent on Beach Boulevard? Or I mention, like, yeah, our navigation center, it's that tent on Beach. Oh, I had no idea what it was, right? Which is great. I mean, that speaks to the forethought of not having a walk-up shelter. So we're running out of time on having to complete something on that site. So the meeting with Jamboree will take our last decision from a couple of months ago and start to materialize that. We have about 18 months left before, or is it a little bit longer?
So that's for the 5 years of the use of the Lemmy half funds to
Yeah.
convert it? Yes.
So about 18 months left? Now,
Yes.
so, okay, so do we have to be in done ribbon cutting mode, or do we have to have like planning dollars?
From what I understand is moving forward on it. Planning.
Okay, so we just have to we have to have an application in to the city effectively
Yes.
to do something with that. Okay. Care courts, those are supposed to be up and running next month. Like October was the deadline for Orange County. Do you have any more information for us on those, or is the county still has no idea what they're doing?
I have not received any additional information. I will say that we attended a community court recently in support of one of our local residents who completed it, who had hundreds of arrests leading up to his entry into community court. And since he got into that program, 0 contacts with law enforcement, and successfully graduated that program and
that's
adjudicated his cases that were pending.
I think that's a different program, though, because the
Yes.
care courts haven't started yet, right?
I'm just saying, yes, there's
Okay.
several other programs out there that the county does have.
Thank you for
and
clarifying that. Yeah, and then it was great to hear about homeless court, right? That's something I think we should really be talking about. When I get the police log in the morning, it's kind of disappointing to see all of the arrests of homeless people for being homeless, and that just seems to potentially add on to the burden of becoming unhomeless or housed again.
And that's one of the benefits of working with our community prosecutor is we don't arrest people per se for being homeless, for the illegal lodging, the other violations that are out there that are commonly attributed to those experiencing homelessness, that we work with our community prosecutor's office to help people through those, and then through the different court programs to give them a chance to step up, become self-sufficient, and address those issues that led them to being in that situation to ultimately be arrested.
Okay. And then I think Councilmember McKeon talked about shrinking the department numbers to effectively, as low as possible. And I think I do want to hesitate on that type of comment because it could be the same idea of you stop taking your medicine because you feel fine, and it's the medicine that's actually solving the problem. So I want to be very careful that we don't dismantle something that is keeping the homeless, that is solving the homeless problem and getting to effective zero, because we have a pipeline of a navigation center or homeless task force or Be Well that is moving our folks that are falling out or preventing folks falling out of homelessness, and those that do into a system that then navigates them through into either permanent supportive housing, temporary housing, while they're working on getting their job back, or back into the regular housing force. So I do want to make sure that we're cautious that we aren't just shrinking for the sake of shrinking. Now, once we get to effective zero, which I'm confident that with the staff we have and the progress that we're making, that we can hopefully get there. But I want to make sure that we don't just say, okay, we have a zero, let's shut it all down, and then we're back up to where we are. So I do want to be careful of that. Yeah, so thank you again so much for all of the data and information that we keep kind of continuing down this track of trying to do something that the county still refuses to handle it for us. And I hope that obviously in every conversation that I have with county folks is asking them to please do more for the cities. But I applaud what staff has been doing with the resources that they've provided to solve a major community issue. And we'll talk about the other community issue a little bit later in the day. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Councilwoman.
Thank you very much. And thank you for all of the information, all of your hard work that you do day in and day out, and bringing this forward to us. I have a number of comments and questions too. Let's see. First, I appreciate the city's community prosecutor role, the way that you discussed it, specifically in trying to help people, really. If, a lot of the times people have many warrants and things on their record, and they might have very well earned all of those, by the way, but sometimes those are the things that end up stopping them from being able to proceed to get housing. And if they're doing everything that they can and we're able to help them at least get those off of their record, I really appreciate that effort. So thank you for clarifying. I know that's not the only thing that they're doing, but I appreciate that piece of it. In addition, I was able to attend the last 2 community collaborative meetings And it's been really great to see all of the faith-based, or not all of, many of the faith-based groups, churches, nonprofits get together and talk on a quarterly basis. I ended up coming because I heard about it through one of those groups both times, but I think that it's exactly what we were looking to do for a long time. So I really appreciate that that's happening, and I've seen the types of connections that need to be made by many of those groups. They go there and then they go and have coffee afterwards and develop a plan. I know some of them ended up in the Navigation Center doing karaoke and other things, working together to try to provide, I'll still call that services, because it's still helping to kind of provide these different types of social services. So thank you for doing that. I did want to mention though, sorry, a little food there. At the last collaborative meeting, one of the church's leaders got up and spoke, and he talked about the fact that they are being stretched really thin with regards to people coming and asking for rental assistance typically, and sometimes food. And could you just talk a little bit about that anecdote that kind of came up in that last collaborative meeting? If you can't, I can.
You got me stumped.
That's fine. So what happened was this gentleman said, I don't remember which church, this downtown, they ended up, they get, requests for help every month. And normally they'll have a certain dollar amount on hand for that are donations from their church community. This last time it was about $25,000 for the month that they had been asked for. And they had pretty much commented that that's not something that they could continue to do and sustain on an ongoing basis. So when I hear talk about this potential bloat, I get that. We want to make sure we're being efficient with our resources. But my concern is that based upon the challenges in the housing market and various things, people are feeling a massive impact due to the costs of mortgages and rents. And also with a lot of the COVID funding that was just stopped, and also the rental, the eviction piece of that as well, those constraints, we're likely to see a lot more people who are potentially going to be homeless. People that you wouldn't think, and that when you look at them, you wouldn't assume that. There are a lot of things where people are talking about where they're not eating, or they're choosing whether to pay rent, mortgage, or eat because they want to still appear as though they're okay as well. And so I think that that's something that we need to keep in mind when we're thinking about prevention as well. And with that, there was a UCI OC poll that found that homelessness and affordable housing were the top resident concerns in Orange County, and that includes here in Huntington Beach. And specifically, one of the people that was at their event, they talked about more than 52% of respondents who are renters have worried in the past year about being able to pay their rent and the threat of eviction, while 1/5 of homeowners, 20%, have worried in the last year about being able to pay their mortgage and the risk of foreclosure. Housing expenses as a percentage of people's income is probably at an all-time high. So the idea that people are particularly concerned about this right now doesn't shock a lot of people. And then essentially we're potentially at the precipice of this becoming worse. With that too, I know we looked at a lot of the data points, which I appreciate. You know how I like the data. But one thing that I think we don't include if we're thinking about the city as a whole within that is the number of people who are homeless in our schools. So I pulled the data down from 2022, and I don't think a lot of people think about this because a lot of them think about just who they see on the streets or maybe in our shelter. Ocean View School District has 448 students, 6.5% of their population for 2022. Huntington Beach City School District had 32, which is 0.7%. And Huntington Beach Union High School District had 440, or 2.9% of their population who are currently homeless. And those are the McKinney-Vento numbers, so it's totally different counting. But I think it's important that we think about that.
Yeah, if I could add.
Please do.
I also happen to be the police department's manager of our school resource program, and we recently just met with all the superintendents of the 5 school districts that serve Huntington Beach. and offered our services, both from a social services standpoint and Be Well, to be there for their, not just students, but also staff that might be in those situations that need our assistance as well. And we will be attending a meeting next month. I think Westminster School District's the first one we're meeting with, where we are going to present to all their social and social service staff and school psychologist to let them know what services we have as a city to assist them.
I appreciate that. Thank you for providing those resources to our schools and kind of acknowledging those larger numbers that we have. I wanted to, let's see, also you talked about, well, two things. I appreciate that you helped participate in the community cafe, a neighborly conversation on homelessness, and also the NAMI presentation that came out of that too, so people can have a different conversation about this besides just, we all want our quality of life, but having a different understanding of people's stories, I think is really important and can kind of change the discussion around homelessness and how we want to better serve our community. So thank you for that. You also talked about, let's see here. Let's see. I'm on the wrong page, but that's okay. I know what it is. The Garden Grove program with the street medicine. Can you talk a little bit more about that, like what's happening right now and what we're looking at?
So it's a preventative medicine or preventative care program where they will have medical staff proactively going out to assist those who are in need of services. I believe the number for Huntington Beach is 40,000 residents in Huntington Beach take advantage of or utilize CalAIMS, and it would offer services to the most vulnerable population to help them get their medications, get to appointments, get them basic care and treatment, so their only option is not going to the emergency room or calling the fire department for assistance and services. It's really a proactive approach to reduce the impact while improving the quality of care for a vulnerable population.
Great. And then Garden Grove is doing that right now. And is that kind of a pilot program, and then they're looking at it again in the future?
Yes,
for
and that
expansion?
would come at no cost to the local jurisdictions that they partner with.
Great, but potentially a reduction in calls for service for other activities?
Yes.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you very much. Let's see. Wanted to acknowledge the 2-year anniversary of Be Well and HB. We were the first to have it, and now it's spread across the county. And I think most everyone would acknowledge that they're doing a great job as part of our system of care here. So just wanted to acknowledge that. Also, the homeless court on site is exciting because I know we talked about that with the county and everything, and it's great to hear that they're able to come to them, because a big challenge and barrier into correcting a lot of those things is getting to the courts. So to bring it to the navigation center is excellent. One of the things that Councilmember McKeon mentioned was he was asking about having more services on site, which I think is great. I know SOS has been coming for a long time. But he had mentioned that the more services on site, the more we can navigate through the system. And while I'm very excited that we have our Pathways project coming and supported by this council, I think that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the original Healing Center approach, the whole objective was to get more services on site, so that way we could navigate people into housing and move past those challenges and those barriers that are there. Also, a couple other things. One thing that was mentioned as well is by Councilmember McKeon is that with Tony's help, it can advocate for more state funding. And this isn't a question, this is really more of a comment that I appreciate the connections that the mayor has, but I think if we pass a housing element, we'll have a lot more opportunity to have potential funding for state grants and things like that, and especially as we are looking to build a permanent shelter, we're going to need a lot of that funding to come from various levels, including the state. So I think it's very important, not only with availability of funding for grants via the state, but also, again, the sheer fact that we need more affordable housing, and that having that affordable housing will assist in people being able to move past that barrier of not having available housing in our community. So those are the things that we need to really think about. One thing that was noted before is that there were about 11% of all calls for service correct? And you mentioned it was even at 9 at one point?
Yes.
And that's kind of average over time for the last number of years?
Yes, for the last couple of years, we've been tracking it. I don't have the exact data, I only have this year's data, but it typically trends around 11% of all calls for service for the police department.
Yeah, thank you. And the reason that I bring this up is I just want to kind of level set back to, this work has been being done and the foundation set for a long time. Thank goodness we've had our social services workers that came on staff, I think last December, November, right? So I think that was part of probably the push in the first part of the year to really like get out there, and I think really started connecting with the community. But just to level set back to things that were said in the past, Mayor Pro Tem during her campaign had talked about that 7 out of the 8 calls that she went out on when she went on a ride-along were for homelessness, and that very well might be the case. But I think when we talk about things like that anecdotally, that would turn into 87.5% of calls for service. And I would hate for people to think that that's what it was before and that it's at 11% now. And so I thank you for just saying what it was over the long haul. I appreciate that. Also in that same speech, it was mentioned that the navigation center was sitting there practically empty. And we know that that is not true, but you talked about a lot of people think that because we don't want a lot of people, kind of just around the navigation center. So I can imagine how people could misunderstand that. But thank you for clarifying that. Also, I appreciate that we are having these quarterly updates, but I also did just want to re-clarify also that the 90-day plan that was locked in a drawer didn't exist, but I do appreciate these quarterly updates. They're very helpful, and I hope that we continue to have those as well. Let's see if there's anything else. Love the fact that we're going to have the data and a system where we can actually work with that. Now, is that only going to be city, and I know we're looking at the North County SPA, correct?
It's Outreach Grid is separate from the SPA. It's a North Orange County collaborative.
The collaborative, I meant. But I guess my question with that is, and I don't know that it would work at all, but part of the challenge is who and how are we collecting information and sharing it? And I know when we're talking with the collaborative, and I don't mean the North Orange County Collaborative, I mean the collaborative meetings with all the faith-based and nonprofit groups. Sometimes I feel like they have information that they might be able to input in things too, and I don't know if it's appropriate because I know there's a lot of different rules. But can you speak to that at all?
I think it's important to protect our data first and foremost, and then to really isolate our services. Not isolate our services, but collecting the data and personal information is something that should be entrusted to us alone, so there's no risk of the information being shared or getting out of there. If they want, they're always more than willing to, share information with us that could be helpful into those systems. Most of them do require a waiver from the individual to even have their information in that system. Mm-hmm. It's always good to get as much as possible. We really need to protect that data.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
What we would be using it for is our social workers, our outreach officers would have access to that. Then we'd also pair it up with Mercy House, the Operator's Navigation Center, would have access to it to give us a real-time bed reservation system as well.
That's great. And thank you for working with the county to re-expand back into Yale and have access to those shelters too, for those that maybe two things, if our shelter is full, or two, if people are not eligible to be at our shelter. So I appreciate that. And also wanted to just commend the social services team, the task force, and Be Well as well for all of the efforts to actually move people from whatever position they're in to housing. And I know how much you go through to get to that point. And it takes, we talk about how many contacts and, from month to month. And it sometimes, I don't even know, it takes thousands of contacts sometimes. But that person's life is completely changed. And Mayor Pro Tem talked about that too with the person who got housed. And those stories, I think, change people's hearts. And that being said, having our volunteers for the HB Cares program is going to be massive. And especially as hopefully we get to expand what they do, maybe even helping to remind people to go do certain things, to call, to text, just to have somebody to connect with them, because you can't all be everywhere. And that helps with really efficiency of our program too. So anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate all that you do.
Thank you.
Anything else, members? Seeing none. Thank you again for all your hard work, and thanks for the hard work on this issue and also the presentation. We really appreciate everything. Thank you. Thank you. All right, members, we're moving down the agenda. We have consent items number 9 through 16. Would any member like to pull an item 9 through 16?
Can I pull 11, please?
Okay.
I'd like to pull 12.
Mr. Kalmick pulls 11, and Councilwoman Bolton pulls 12. Any others?
10.
10. Okay, 10's been pulled by Natalie Mosier.
And I'll move the balance.
I'll second.
It's been the balance. So clerk, just a clarification, 10, 11, and 12 have been pulled. So we're voting on, it's been moved and seconded on 9, 13, 14, 15, 16.
Second was Vandermark, is that correct?
No, it was
Bolton.
Bolton, sorry. All right, so I'll go ahead and call roll. Councilmember Kalmick?
Aye.
Mosier?
Aye.
Vandermark?
Yes.
Strickland?
Aye.
McKeon?
Yes.
Bolton?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns is absent, so we're a yes on 9, 13, 14, 15, and 16.
Perfect. Okay, members, we're going to go to file item 10. Councilwoman Mosier, you may open. You pulled the item.
Sure, thank you very much. I'm going to pull up the caper. First, I wanted to appreciate the fact that we had the supplemental communication from Jennifer Villasenor with the revised caper. I just wanted to, acknowledge that this is about housing. This is about the tenant-based rental assistance, all of these different pieces. And, without a certified housing element, a lot of these things, it's like, if we have this, we'll proceed. And, I just think that it's really important that we can't, I feel like it's kind of pretending that we're doing things. I know we want to make sure we get funding for everything, and it's very important, but we need to mean what we say, and we can demonstrate that by proceeding with certifying a housing element, and we can do that at any time. I hope that we do, and drop the litigation that we're in the middle of. I do appreciate that the update is there with the redlined items, and I definitely will be recommending that we proceed with what we have, because it's important that we get the funding. I am curious, there was a note on there, and maybe Steve Holtz might be able to help me with this. It talked about not providing, I think we had 4 fewer people receive the tenant-based rental assistance funding than what was, I'll call it budgeted or allotted. Can you just talk to that so we can understand why?
Sure. The tenant-based rental assistance program is a rental assistance program that the city provides through our home federal entitlement grant. The city uses that money to subsidize the rent of tenants in privately owned property. And one aspect of that program is a part of our homelessness prevention strategy. Mm-hmm. So it's referrals through our outreach team and through several nonprofits that we work with. There's been challenges with that program over the last couple of years because of high rents in the city, low vacancies, and also because many landlords in the city, because of those factors, have choices of who they can rent to, and are preferring not to rent to tenants with all of the requirements that come with our program. So that's why the numbers did drop.
Okay,
not for lack of demand.
Right, and then so will that money will then roll over to next year, or how will that work?
Exactly. And that action was taken by the council when we brought our action plan in April.
Got it. And just as a mention to people too, if, the Orange County Housing Authority Section 8 waiting list was reopened and it closes next Friday, and it's important for people to apply if they need rental assistance, and I think it is associated with this discussion, so wanted to mention.
Can I just add on? So
Please.
our tenant-based rental assistance program is a temporary emergency homelessness prevention rental assistance program. It only goes for 2 years, compared to the Housing Authority Section 8 program, which is an indefinite rental assistance program. Otherwise, they're very similar in the way that the rental assistance is structured. So the Housing Authority only opens their waiting list every 5 to 10 years. It's a very narrow window for anyone who might need rental assistance to apply. It's important to do that before the end of next week.
Great, thank you very much. And I will move the item.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Clerk, call the roll.
Councilmember Kalmick?
Aye.
Mosher?
Aye.
Vandermark?
Yes.
Strickland?
Aye.
McKeon?
Yes.
Bolton?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns absent, 601.
Thank you. Members, now file item number 11. Councilman Kalmick, you pulled the item. You're open. No, Kalmick
I did.
pulled 11.
Yeah, there's, I have a couple of changes to this, so I think we can probably take the staff presentation if that's, sorry, Chief, I didn't.
Good evening, council members. Before you this evening is a recommendation from our Harbor Commission. Oops. Stand by a second there. I want to move forward. Thank you. Perfect. So before you this evening is a recommendation from our Harbor Commission regarding Title 33 CFR 334.930. Specifically paragraph 3 in regards to the public navigation channel for the Anaheim Bay. So as council may be aware, over the last few years, they've done some reconstruction and the Navy has worked on to reconfigure the navigation channel, thus making it more safe and more priority access. It is the only access that we have to our harbor currently. And so with that, the Naval has opened up recommendations for us to provide to them on how to manage the actual public navigation channel. And one of the things in there in particular that the Harbor Commission wanted to bring to your attention and request a letter from the mayor to the Navy, it talks about motorized access through the harbor. Right now it allows kayaks, paddleboards, sails, basically human-powered type vessels to move through the channel. The Harbor Commission really feels like this is an unsafe practice going through there. They've had discussions with the Navy commander. And so we're really looking tonight to bring this to your attention, to bring their recommendations in a letter that's in the staff report, to provide any questions or comments. Our chair of the Harbor Commission, Craig Shopner, is here, and our vice chair, Van Voris, is here as well, if you'd like to ask him any specific questions.
Thank you, Chief. So I actually talked to Vice Chair Van Voris and Chief over the weekend to kind of understand. There was a couple of two call-outs and some inconsistencies with what the sheriffs wanted and what the letter of the intent was. And so the two changes that we're contemplating were the adding or removing from the amendment jet skis, because jet skis are licensed. Because this basically said that the recommendation would remove jet skis from the prohibited craft to go through the opening. Now, all the personal, like rowboats, anything you have to use your body power for, getting through that tidal inlet is going to be tough, and you're going to get stranded, and I think it just becomes an issue. But the larger issue also was the California boat or vessel registration, striking the word California from there, because there could be issues where you're coming from Oregon, coming into the harbor. I don't want to issue, and zooming out. The issue is really being able to call the police on somebody doing something wrong. So the jet skis have a tag on them, they've got a license number, and if you're registered in other places, you have a license number. So I think I talked with staff and Mr. Van Voorhis and said that we could probably, it probably makes more sense to eliminate the word California and add the jet skis back in there, or personal watercraft, because they're all licensed, so that we have the most access to the coast. Because my other concern was coastal access, that if you prohibit personal watercraft, where can you launch them, really, into the ocean? And it's like Long Beach or Newport, maybe, like it's really far. Whereas the rowboats, all this stuff, you can go launch them from the beach pretty easy, not easily, but you can. It's easier to get them out there. So I didn't want to prohibit folks that have those jet skis that want to go out into the ocean in the harbor can get them, or can launch them out at Sunset Marina and do that. So those were the two changes. So I'll move the item with those two changes to eliminate the word
I
California.
just want to ask staff, you're okay with those changes? It seems reasonable to me.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'll second that motion.
So the term California and personal watercraft, correct?
Yes, so removing the term, effectively. I think
Okay.
staff understands the intent as well. Okay.
Okay, all right, I'll call for the Councilmember Kalmick.
Aye.
Mosher.
Aye.
Vandermark.
Yes.
Strickland.
Aye.
McKeon.
Yes.
Bolton.
Aye.
Mr. Burns is absent, so the item passes 601 with the mentioned amendments.
Thank you. Members, we're now on file item number 12. Councilwoman Bolton pulled the item, so Councilwoman,
Yes.
the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. I just have a question about finding number 12 in this grand jury report, which says, there have been public concerns and requests expressed over the years for public programs to include spay-neuter programs by Orange County Animal Care. And I guess what the grand jury is asking is for the city to either agree or disagree with that, or explain what our position is. And the response in the draft is reviews specific to operations of the Orange County Animal Shelter have not been conducted. Reviews specific to it have not been conducted by the city of Huntington Beach. I wanted to ask why that was the response, because we have gotten emails from folks expressing concerns about the shelter. And so it seems to me like it would be more accurate to indicate that we had gotten contacts, and there was one in today's supplemental communications about the animal shelter and expressing concerns about that. So if staff could, maybe staff just needs to explain the process to me, but I would appreciate it if someone would explain the answer to me.
So I haven't received the public concerns or requests about that specific issue. I'm happy to take a look at them and come back with a response, but
Okay.
I have not personally seen them, and
I can gather stuff up and forward it to you. Okay.
Then I'd be happy to revise that or take a second look at that.
Okay. So
let's hold it over.
Hold it over.
I'm actually very concerned. Thank you, Councilwoman, for bringing it up. I've had people reach out to me regarding a lot of the concerns they have with the shelter, and so I would love to thank you for bringing that up, Councilwoman. So we'll pull that item for now.
Okay.
Do we have?
Is there consensus?
Yeah. I just
Sorry.
have. Do we have a TikTok with having to respond before they come and arrest us for not complying?
I can answer that. Connor Highland, Deputy City Attorney. We have requested an extension, and that has been granted. So we have about 60 more days. I don't have the exact days in front of me, but it's about 60 more days.
16 or 60?
60,
Okay.
60.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So would you, okay to table the item?
Yeah.
Just table it?
There's consensus, I believe, to table the item. Is there any objection?
No.
Oh, I see none.
All right, item tabled, thanks.
Okay, members, we're now on file item 17. Staff, please introduce your report.
Good evening. Lieutenant Toby Archer, Huntington Beach Police Department, talking about the recommendation for the e-bike ordinance. So some have asked, why is this update necessary? In 2015, the California Vehicle Code was updated to include 3 different classes of electronic bicycles: Class 1, Class 2, Class 3. That's a quick little grid there to see the definitions between the two. There's age requirements for Class 3 bikes, there's helmet requirements, and then there's definitions for what they can accomplish. Since 2015, though, as we've seen, there's been incredible development, progress, and innovation in the bikes, and what we're seeing now is different devices such as these, and the proliferation of these Sur-on-type bicycles, electric motorcycles, electric-driven or electric-powered motorcycles, and the vehicle code and the definitions in the vehicle code have not caught up to these yet. There are numerous different definitions for pocket bikes, for electronic bikes, for mopeds, for motor-driven cycles and motorcycles, but a lot of those do not conform. So that's part of the reason why we need an updated law or something that we can use here for some more local control, given the fact that the vehicle code does not have an answer to all of the proliferation of the new types of conveyances. As I said, many of the newer type bicycles, and I'll use that in quotes because they are electric conveyances, but they don't necessarily conform to the definition of what a bicycle is. We see a lot of these Sur-on type bicycles, if you will, that don't have pedals and aren't able to be powered by pedaling. And because of this, the laws that we have on the books now are confusing and vague, and a lot of the officers, myself included, don't necessarily know if there's a section that applies, and there are some sections that are already in existing law that apply to mopeds, other sections, different sections that apply to bicycles, and even more so that apply to motorcycles. So having a municipal code that creates a comprehensive section that covers all types of these conveyances at once gives us the ability to just write a ticket or take some sort of enforcement action for seeing unsafe. It also closes some of the loopholes with lack of fitting definitions and applications of law. So what does it change? In our municipal code now, it will add the definitions of what we currently have in the vehicle code for electric bicycles. It updates the fee schedules to be consistent with existing council resolutions. So in the municipal code, as it's written now, I believe there's a $5 fine for impounding a bicycle. We wanted to make that consistent with what the Huntington Beach Police Department fee schedule already has. It provides us the authority to impound some electric bicycles that are being operated by juveniles. So for instance, if someone is riding a bicycle or a Sur-on or an electric motorcycle, if you will, it gives us the ability to impound that and then release it to a parent or responsible adult from the station. So these are the definitions that we would like to add. And then this would be the language for the section that gives us the ability to issue citations for riding in an unsafe manner. As you can see, there's a number of examples that are given at the bottom of what that may be, but that isn't designed to be an all-inclusive list of what an unsafe manner is, and not to mention it doesn't necessarily, we don't want to use that as a definition to write everyone a ticket for any time we see a violation. What it does do is it gives us the ability to say someone is operating something we know is inherently dangerous. They may have foot or feet that aren't on pegs, or they're rolling with a wheelie with one hand on the ground, or doing some other type of riding that we can tell is inherently dangerous, and it gives us the ability to write a ticket for it. It also gives us the ability to since it's a municipal code, issue civil citations or criminal citations. And that's already established law that we use now. Any municipal code that we have that's already law gives the officer discretion to either write a civil citation or a criminal citation with a municipal code. And what that means is a civil citation doesn't go on the person's record, and it doesn't go on their driving record or criminal history for that matter. It's civil in nature, much like what code enforcement does already, but officers have the ability to write those citations and do currently a lot during the summer months on the beach for people that are carrying open containers of alcohol and things like that. What we're seeing now is that we will write tickets sometimes now for bicycle violations, maybe a juvenile without a helmet. And if we write them on a criminal citation, we have the options to either send them to the bicycle class, which I know we've talked about in the past, but also they can be referred to the court. And what we're noticing is sometimes we're coming into contact with the same individuals, and once we've taken away the option for sending them to the diversion class, they're still given that option by the court, and we have no control over that. So this gives us the ability to issue a fine for the violation. There's still a process in place, just like any other ticket issued by code enforcement or by us, for an appeals process on a civil citation. It's not that there's no ability to fight the ticket, but it gives them the ability to fight it in a different manner and go through an appeals process, which has already been established. So it also gives us the ability to do a couple other things. As we talked about before, we don't have the ability to issue California Vehicle Code violations on private property with public access. And we've had a number of different complaints at shopping centers like Seacliff Shopping Center or 5 Point Shopping Center, where people are riding these bikes, whether they're Surons or e-bikes, through stop signs, dangerously close to other people, pedestrians, and the vehicle code doesn't apply. So we actually have no ability to do any enforcement on those public access private property lots. So this would give us another tool for officers to utilize to take some enforcement action when people are calling to complain about behaviors in those public access but private lots. Are there any questions? I'm sure there are.
When you say criminal citation, I'm thinking a 14, 15-year-old, what would make you, and would that go on their record? Like, look, we need to curb the e-bike problem that we have here in town, but it raises my hairs when you say a criminal citation.
Sure. So, great question. And again, yet another reason why we would like to have our officers the ability to have discretion. A criminal citation is, when you hear the term ticket, that's what it is. It's a criminal citation. If you were to receive a red light ticket or a stop sign ticket driving your car now, it's the same ticket. It's a criminal citation, and that goes to the court. Now, there are times when a 16-year-old or a 15-year-old who's driving without a license, it may warrant getting a citation that sends them to the court. But you may have a 12 or 13-year-old that you want to have some penalty for what they're doing, but you don't want to write them a $400 red light violation, because that's the only thing that we have now to utilize as a tool. If we had the option of writing them a lower price ticket, and by the way, I think I skipped over this, but the fee schedule that would go with this is already established by council resolution. It would be $125 for the first fine, $250 for the second violation.
And that's the maximum penalty under the criminal citation?
No, sorry, that's the civil citation.
Okay. What about the maximum penalty on the criminal citation?
We don't have control over that. That's established by the courts. So depending on what the violation is, there's already a bail schedule for that. But if, like a red light ticket, if I wrote a 14-year-old a red light ticket on a bicycle, it's no different than you receiving a red light ticket in a vehicle. And that's established by the court, and there's court penalties and a number of other things. Generally speaking, depending on what violation you're talking about, that can be upwards of $300, $400. And so an officer may feel that the punishment doesn't fit the crime, given the fact that the only option we have now would be to write a criminal citation, but they may feel like a $125 citation is much more appropriate for the violation they witnessed.
And I know I'm sounding outlandish, but I just want to make it clear, we're not talking about juvenile hall or anything like that for some kind of e-bike violation, correct?
No, anything that we're proposing in this municipal code would be an infraction, which again, obviously there's 3 levels. There's infraction, misdemeanors, and felonies. It would be no different than receiving an infraction ticket for anything else.
Thank you.
Nobody wants to be arresting kids on bikes, right? Thank you again for bringing all this up. I got a couple of emails, and I got tagged in a tweet, I guess, earlier today talking about right on the sidewalk against the flow of traffic. And some folks had concerns that you've got short rides that may require, you'd have to do a giant loop to get all the way around, whereas it's 150 feet in the wrong direction on a sidewalk. And as I read the code here, even if we were to strike riding on the sidewalk and against the flow of traffic, the way it's written is examples of riding in an unsafe manner may include, but are not limited to, the following actions. So even if it was struck, it could still be argued that you were riding the wrong way on the sidewalk, could be considered dangerous. And I think it's based on kind of the confluence of issues is what this is. And my point I'm getting to is, I don't want to see folks at 10 o'clock at night riding their bike on the wrong side of Beach Boulevard from work, because they can't get they're in the middle of the block and it's a quarter mile to the next light and we're going to require them to walk their bike in the wrong direction. Like, I don't want to see folks getting hassled for that. I want to see this used to deal with the hooliganism that folks are reporting pretty often to council and to the internet, that there's roving groups of teenagers that haven't seen red asphalt, don't know what it means to either get bounced off the hood of a car at 40 miles an hour, or don't understand when they run into somebody with this much mass, that you can cause severe damage. And so I think the goal here is to protect our residents, to protect kids that don't know better. And the schools, thankfully have really stepped up and have really started this education program for something that just kind of emerged out of nowhere. But I want to make sure that we are, helping for the kids that convince their parents to buy them electric motorcycles that are not street legal, that we can get to, by confiscating them, we get to have a conversation with those parents, as they go and get their bike back from their kids on that. So I just want to make sure that the legislative record is not going after folks that aren't causing a problem but are potentially riding the wrong direction on a sidewalk, because that's really we don't have the infrastructure yet to make it totally convenient to get around this city.
Sure, and obviously, I think, the legislative intent here is not to have something that we're going to harass everybody with. It's going to give us the option to address what the community concerns are already. And there are a number of laws that are on the books that may seem petty that you're not seeing officers issue tickets for now, right? It just gives us the ability to really, and like what we're talking about, it gives us the ability for a downgraded version of what it closes some loopholes. It gives us the ability to enforce on public access, private property, and some other things. That's in there because that is inherently dangerous, right? Riding on the sidewalk. But there are times where that might be the safest maneuver, and this doesn't absolve people from being safe just because it's a short distance. However, I think if they can articulate, hey, I'm riding on the sidewalk to go here, and there's no driveways, which is what the hazard is when you're riding opposing traffic, whether it's in a bike lane or on the sidewalk. If they can articulate, I'm doing this in a safe manner, I think that's reasonable. And it doesn't absolve the officer who would be issuing the ticket for being able to articulate the fact that you have to be operating this in an unsafe manner. Just because there's given examples of what it may be doesn't mean that people are going to go out there and just write tickets for that.
Right, and we have an appeals process for the civil citation?
We do, yes. And there's multiple levels of the appeals process.
Okay, so that's not just one and done for that.
Correct.
Okay, great. The speed limit issue that was brought up as well, which I think is in the code, but not on your slide here. Again, that says there's a lot of ors in there in that regard. So again, like if someone's getting a good downhill clip on let's say on Golden West, right, and there's nobody around, we're not just going to be citing folks for exceeding a speed limit?
Exactly. I think, again, going back to having to articulate the fact that operating it in an unsafe manner. If someone is on a triathlon bike going down Edwards Hill at 40 miles an hour, that's probably not unsafe. If they blow the stop sign without looking, then I think that's a different case. But it gives examples of what we might see, because these are often things that are articulated to us as unsafe things. It's a number of what our primary collision factors are, which is why we included them in the law.
Okay, wonderful. And then I will be reaching out to our congressional representatives about the bike racks at the post offices. That seems like a pretty easy fix there. So thank you so much.
I do want to add one thing. We did have a typo, and I will take full responsibility for this, but we will be eliminating letter G because it's essentially the same as letter E. So I put this in here, but I believe that is one change that we want to make from Legistar.
Anything else, members?
Yeah, a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
Thanks.
Councilwoman.
We had talked a little bit earlier during the study session about data, collecting accident data that is specific to e-bikes. And Chief, I don't know if you were here, but I was saying that I recall that we had a discussion maybe last year where you provided some statistics on numbers of accidents that involved e-bikes. I don't know if you remember when that was. For some reason, I cannot remember when that was.
I don't recall a specific date, but we did have that conversation.
Yeah, okay. Well, one thing I wanted to ask about moving forward is if we can collect data in a way that designates or specifies, yes, this particular accident or collision involved an e-bike. I mean, you guys, you're the experts on that, but I just want to ask if it's possible, because I think as we continually recognize, it's really useful to have data as much as we can.
So we are capturing that data effective. Since that conversation, I don't recall when, but we are capturing that data relative to overall crashes involving bicycles, e-bicycles, and then percentage of e-bikes versus, total crashes, et cetera. And I'm happy to provide that to you.
Oh, that would be great. And then another question, a resident wrote in and asked if it made sense to pass this on an emergency basis, to make it an emergency ordinance so that we didn't have to wait 30 days from the second reading. And so I just wanted to raise that with my colleagues and see what people thought about doing that. And if there are any legal impediments, ask the city attorney for your recommendation as well.
So I think we have to have findings to support the emergency, and the findings aren't built into this. What we could do is see if we can represent it at the next meeting as an emergency ordinance, and then that way it would take effect immediately. And I'm looking at Connor Highland.
Yeah, we can look into that and try to get back to you guys by the next meeting as an emergency ordinance.
Mechanically, we have to build findings in to justify the emergency nature of the emergency ordinance.
Right. Okay, and also, Chief, too, if you had any recommendations or preferences, I wanted to make sure, we ask you about it as well.
Yes, so I'm not opposed to that at all. I think if we're able to do it and we can have the articulation, it works for me. I get, as you well know, because you get them too, I get a lot of emails about this issue. It's definitely a community priority, so I believe we'll be able to have the justification.
Okay, great, I appreciate that. One final question, and if you don't know the answer, please don't worry about it, but I was just curious about other cities or jurisdictions that had e-bike regulations, if anybody is aware. I think Director Vu mentioned Laguna Niguel as being one other city that has e-bike regulations, and I was just curious if there were ones in addition to that.
So various cities have e-bike regulations up and down the coast, starting from Dana Point, San Clemente, et cetera. What I've asked Lieutenant Archer to do is pull together the cities, including the Orange County Sheriff's Department, and have a summit here regarding all of the rules and trying to figure out where we have common themes and where we need to work on issues so that we can better shore up our laws. So he's putting that together, and we'll do it here in the city. So I will tell you when that date is, but I just recently asked him to do that, so it's not coming in the next week or two.
That's awesome. Thank you, and thank you, Lieutenant Archer, for all your hard work on this.
Thanks.
So, Councilmember Mosier, I was OCTA today for a Bike and Ped subcommittee meeting, and they actually have aggregated a lot of this already. So I recommend reaching out to I should have told you this privately. You look great. I did it yesterday. OCTA is putting this all together. So they've reached out to all the cities to pull their ordinances together, see what other cities have done for both bike and who's treating bike and e-bike separately. And then they're actually having a bike ride here next week.
On the 24th at Rad Power Bikes.
Yeah. They're doing a big bike down through the city just to see what's going on. But yeah, OCTA's, I think, put this together for you already.
Councilman McKeon.
Lieutenant Archer, I know you said no juvenile hall for e-bike violations, but when you impound the bikes, can you at least take the kids by the jail to show them what bad behavior can lead to?
We can probably develop some sort of program for that. Scared straight.
Just kidding.
I kind of like that idea. No, thank you, Lieutenant Archer. So I think you were starting to talk about the civil penalties that the council already determined before. And you had mentioned 125 for the first offense, 250. Did it continue from there? I don't remember.
It caps out at $500 or $600. So it's 125. And I believe it's 125 for the first offense, 250 for the second within 6 months. And then I believe $500 or $600 for the third offense.
Okay.
600.
Okay, that's helpful. And then is it the Ciron? Is that the correct name, or what is the?
That's one model of an electric. It's not technically an e-bike, and it's not technically a motorcycle, depending on which definition you're looking at. But yeah, that is one of the manufacturers.
Okay, and so if you saw somebody out driving that, which that should not be on our roads here, correct?
That is correct.
What would you likely do if you had the time and the resources in that moment?
Well, that's a good question. What we are doing, and we are doing this, is interpreting the law to treat them as pocket bikes. Because most of the definitions in the vehicle code now reference cubic centimeter engine size, and these are electric, so they don't fit into those definitions. Some jurisdictions, and we did reach out to a number of different jurisdictions to poll what they are doing. Some are treating them as off-highway motorcycles, and some are treating them as pocket bikes. And there's definitions of brake horsepower, engine size, and they don't really fit into either of them, and some have taken one interpretation and other jurisdictions take another. We believe that the most appropriate citation or most appropriate violation is them operating a pocket bike because of the way that a pocket bike is defined, and we think that's the closest definition that we use.
So if they were operating a pocket bike, what would you do?
We issue them a citation for, I believe it's 21720 of the California Vehicle Code, which is operating something that's not designed for on-highway use on the highway.
Okay, and you'd have the option to do a criminal versus civil citation at that moment?
Technically, no, because it's a California Vehicle Code,
Okay.
and those can only be issued for criminal citations.
Great. So I think that for me, number one, I appreciate that the schools, I believe, have been working with PD on doing training programs, and I don't know if it's licensing or certification programs at the schools to even be able to have the bikes on campus. So I appreciate that. But that brings to mind that perhaps we can work with the schools to communicate this new ordinance once it's approved. Because I think that my thing is with this is with the parents. I want them to know, one, that they might be on the hook for a lot of money if they're buying certain vehicles for their children to ride on, that there might be consequences that there weren't before. And I want them to know what those are so they can make good decisions and help their kids make good decisions. Do you think that that would be reasonable to work with the school districts?
I think that's absolutely doable. We actually did that for registration this year, and one of the trifold pamphlet that we developed was sent out at registration time. We're working on doing a couple other things to get that out to as many people as possible, not just in digital format, but in print as well. But I think as soon as if this is passed, it shouldn't be a problem to get that sent out digitally by all school districts.
And then riding on the sidewalk against the flow, not okay. Riding on the sidewalk with the flow of traffic, okay?
It depends on where you're at. Technically, it's against the law in a business district,
Okay.
But by and large, there's not a law that's preventing that.
Okay, I just know that, again, we talked about infrastructure earlier and bike safety, and I feel like I know a lot of people I don't think feel safe all the time on the street, so I just wanted, again, to clarify that for people, but it varies depending on the situation.
It does, and it also depends on the ability and the speed of the rider. If someone's going to be riding at 3 miles an hour, it's probably safer for them to be in the bike path. But if you're going to be riding at 27 miles an hour on a Peloton, it's safer to be riding on PCH. I mean, you see that quite a bit. There's people that are in spandex and road bikes that really should be on PCH because that's safer. And it's the same thing in a neighborhood, right? If you're with your 4-year-old who's just learning how to ride, the sidewalk may be a safer option. But if you're going to be riding with a flow of traffic at 20 miles an hour on an e-bike, then the sidewalk might not be the best option.
Do you feel like you're going to have the resources for enforcement for this? Because I see a lot of this around town with large groups of kids too. What are your thoughts on resource?
Well, we can always use more officers, but we're already writing a number of tickets now. But this just gives us another tool in the toolbox for us to write something that we may feel is more appropriate given the circumstances. So we're definitely focusing a lot of enforcement on this. So I think it aids in that.
Okay, great. And I know Councilmember Kalmuck, I think, just mentioned the bike racks. From somebody had mentioned it earlier, and I know it's not exactly on this topic, but city staff, Costa Mesa has a request a bike rack program. Perhaps we can add that to our things that we can do to encourage proper stoppage or parking of bikes. Thank you so much, Lieutenant Archer and the team for the work on this. I think that this is, hopefully, maybe we can have a kind of a report back in a few months, maybe with the, I don't know the best metrics to demonstrate success or not of this. You can figure that out. But I would love to have a report maybe quarterly or every 6 months for a little bit, just to see if this is working, and maybe even stories perhaps we might have from either the kids or adults or parents with this too.
Sure.
Thank you.
So Lieutenant, I have a follow-up question just based on your answers with the councilwoman. Did you say a Saran is not legal anywhere in Huntington Beach?
That is correct. It is not legal anywhere.
Anywhere in Huntington Beach? Okay.
Correct.
It's not just, it's not legal for street use at all.
Okay.
So I have a question. Well, in the earlier presentation, they stated that there's no way to tell how many accidents were by e-bikes, but then I spoke to an officer after where he said that there is actually a code designated for accidents with e-bikes. I believe he said it was code 91.
Yeah, I think I can answer that. We can track e-bike collisions if a report is taken. I think what a lot of, in discussions I've been a part of, what happens a lot of times with e-bikes is accidents occur and they're never reported to the police department. People get up, they dust themselves off. What they were looking for, I think in some legislative intent, is to see if the fire department or the hospital has the ability to track whether an injury was caused as a result of an e-bike accident, as opposed to whether a traffic accident was reported and an e-bike was involved in that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So do we have a motion? Go ahead.
To that, as everyone was talking. So fire, like we talked about PD, for instance, collecting data. If someone gets e-bike on e-bike accident or e-bike falls down, somebody calls 911, does PD show up or just fire?
We both do.
Okay.
And if it was an e-bike accident that happened on the street that we're aware of and somebody is injured, we absolutely take a report. But a lot of times the e-bikes are single vehicle and then nobody calls the police or no one calls 911, or they get themselves to the hospital and we don't learn about it. And that's why I think they were looking at potentially collecting better data from the hospitals as to whether or not an injury was as a result of an e-bike.
Do we have access to an insurance company, like auto insurance records type of, or health insurance, either way? Because I know, I mean, if an e-bike crashes into somebody, like I'm assuming that there's like an insurance piece for that, but I'm assuming someone would have called the police, or it's if you don't take a report, would there be valued data to pull from insurance records to be like, yeah, there was a claim put in for a crash against an e-bike?
That would assume that would be involved with the vehicle, and I think more often than not we would be involved. I guess what I'm saying is I know of some anecdotal stories of people that have crashed, for instance, riding home from a bar, and they'll hit a curb and they'll crash. No one is ever called. They're embarrassed or they don't feel that it warrants a police department response. So nobody else is liable for the injury, so they just go home. Or they're just transported by the fire department, but nobody ever calls the police department because they just ran into a pole or ran into a curb. So that's not data that we have to even collect.
So fire doesn't have any extra data then, potentially?
No, we changed our data set recently, probably in the last year. We separated out bike accident from e-bike, so our medics can check a different box, and then we're working with PD to kind of mutually report those.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Do I hear a motion?
I'll go ahead and make the motion.
Moved. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Been moved in
Just
second.
Just for clarification,
Yeah.
is this for approval of the first read or?
Yes, because you mentioned that we had to come back with language for the next one to make it.
So would you also like us to bring back an emergency ordinance?
Yes.
At the next, so the
Yes.
next meeting will have a second read and an emergency ordinance, which will take precedent over the second read?
Correct.
If we have them.
And then that way
Right.
it's immediately.
And if you can't make the findings for the emergency ordinance, then it would just be the regular second reading for that, so.
That was going to be my question.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
that was after the fact, so, yeah.
So Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Okay, and so can you remind me who moved in second again? And
Vandermark.
Vandermark, correct?
Yep. Yes.
Yes, okay. So Councilmember Kalmick?
Aye.
Mosher?
Aye.
Vandermark?
Yes.
Strickland?
Aye.
McKeon?
Yes.
Bolton?
Aye.
And that is with the correction that our officer over here identified to remove that
Correct.
duplicate line. We have that in the record as well. Okay, I'd like to read, the item passes 601 with Burns absent. I'd like to read for the record, introduction of ordinance number 4302, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Huntington Beach amending Chapter 10.84 of the Huntington Beach Municipal Code relating to bicycle regulations.
Wonderful. Do I hear a motion and a second to adjourn?
Motion.
Been moved, has been seconded. We're adjourned.